Hello everybody, I'm back with another fan fiction, but this time it's about My Little Pony Equestria Girls, starring Sunset Shimmer and Twilight Sparkle. So this one is an unrequited, I don't know how to really say that word, unrequited love kind of story. So there's not going to really be any fluffy relationship stuff in this one, but I think that it might be entertaining. I haven't read this one yet, but I read the comments and people were saying that it's quite good. It's actually really good. A really good fic for people that like Sunset Shimmer and Twilight Sparkle. So this time I'm not gonna be drawing at the same time because that took a very long time to edit, and I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna try to do this all in one unedited take and just pause whenever I need to like drink tea or something. So this story is called Beyond the Precipice by TaniaHylian or Hylian on AO3. It is a Sunset Shimmer / Twilight Sparkle My Little Pony Equestria Girls a relationship. There are some pretty bad tags on here. Well, not bad as in like, there are some pretty like angsty tags on here, I guess I would say. And one more thing, drinking tea with a little bit of hooch in it. So shout out to all my hoochers out there. Sunset Shimmer had once been the most talented unicorn in all of Equestria. Then, she became the queen bee at Kennerlot High. But now, after her fall from grace, she must face the painful reality of being a pariah, only to be approached by the 5 girls who once defeated her. Worse even, the dark magic that consumed her may not be gone after all. The monster she became might still be alive within, threatening to destroy what little she has left. But after everything she's done, can those who care about her ever make Sunset believe she's actually worthy of the redemption? Or is she doomed to forever stare at the precipice of her mind? This fic will have unrequited love between Sunset and Twilight, the pony one. No romance beyond that, just lots and lots of pining. Also, it'll feature Celestia and Luna as Sunset's adopted family. So I'm going to try to add my own commentary to this, kind of to make it more interesting. For me, I've always preferred Sci-Twi and Sunset over Sunset and the pony one. I think that they have more chemistry as Sci-Twi, kind of the shy one, the kind of the shy, nerdy kind of one in the relationship, and Sunset is kind of like the assertive one. But I can see from how, like a writing perspective, Sunset being in love with the pony one would be more interesting to write about, and there could be like more possible things to happen in the plot with that instead of Sci-Twi. So those are my thoughts so far. Chapter 1, The Monster in the Mirror. The day Sunset Shimmer had been defeated, she gotten the strangest mercy she'd ever received. She tried to be grateful. Really, she did. After all, they hadn't thrown her in a dungeon or taken her back through the portal in chains. Instead, she would face no punishment, except to repair all that she had broken. She should feel lucky, shouldn't she? She should be happy. Only problem was, after such a long time, she'd almost forgotten how to even be happy. Did it matter? Sunset didn't even think she deserved happiness. So spending a whole week working alongside construction workers to repair the school, barely able to rest, much less think about anything, actually felt like a respite compared to what would come next. School. The moment Sunset stepped inside of the school, 1 week after the fall formal, she saw all eyes on her, heard all the awful whispers, felt the disdain and hatred her classmates held towards her. Even the teachers seemed to look at her with contempt. She tried to pretend that she didn't notice any of that, but that didn't affect her. But none of that changed the truth. Sunset Shimmer was hated, and she deserved it. Oh well, high school didn't last forever. Just 1 year and a half more to go. Even if she had to spend them being a pariah, afterwards she just, what? What was she even going to do after high school? It's not like there was some all-powerful princess out there that she could impress with magic, which didn't even exist in this world. Become her apprentice and make things right this time. Her situation in this world was rather precarious. She never cared to improve it because her plans had been to return to Equestria. But now that she was here for good, she couldn't see how her destiny wouldn't be to end up as a junkie begging for money in some obscure alleyway, I mean. So much for the great sunset shimmer. Sunset stabbed the salad in front of her with her fork. She'd barely registered anything from the moment she walked into the school until now, her lunch break. Only the negativity that seemed to follow her around everywhere she went. She sighed. Well, at least a small blessing was that she could wallow on her sorrow alone, since no one would try to even sit next to her, much less talk. Sunset, the voice rang out like a drill, sharp and unexpected. Before her brain could catch up, arms were around her, tight and insistent. She stood up and jerked backwards instinctively, the chair clattering behind her. Her chest heaved, her stomach twisted, and for a moment she couldn't even think, only react. She scrambled further away, heart hammering, palms slick with sweat. Something about it had felt wrong, invasive, and yet she couldn't even begin to comprehend why she reacted that way, why something inside of her had recoiled so violently. She felt all eyes in the cafeteria land on her and heard the whispers and murmurs all around. Humiliated, she forced herself to take a second to breathe, calm down and take in her surroundings. Only then did she realize who this attacker was. "You don't like hugs?" Pinkie Pie asked, now sitting on the ground and pouting at her. A hollow ache settled in her chest. The part of her that should have welcomed comfort was gone, leaving only reflexive rejection. But before Sunset's scrambled mind could conjure up a reasonable answer, another one of her classmates arrived on the scene. "I told you that a surprise hug wasn't a good idea." Applejack scolded her as she helped her up. "Aw, but she looks so sad and lonely," Pinkie Pie protested. "I thought a hug would make her feel better." "Maybe we should talk to her first, darling, explain our intentions." Rarity came soon after, along with Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy. Now the 5 girls who had defeated Sunset were here, all looking at her like they wanted something. She shrank under their gaze. I'm sorry," Sunset said before they could say anything more. "It's fine, silly," Pinkie assured her. "I should have started with something smaller, maybe a surprise handshake?" No," Sunset shook her head. "I meant about everything, about what I did to you." Her eyes darted across the 5 girls. "To all of you." To her credit, she was sorry. But the main reason she was apologizing now is because she assumed that's what they wanted from her. And now that she'd given it to them, they leave her with her sorrow alone. "I don't think sorry's gonna cut it," Rainbow Dash scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest before turning to speak to her friends. "And for the record, I think this is a terrible idea." "Agreed," Fluttershy, who was cowering behind Rainbow, spoke, barely loud enough to be heard. She was looking at Sunset with fear, which, unfortunately, made a lot of sense, being one of her preferred victims over the years. "Come on, girls. We promised Twilight we'd try." Applejack spoke. And try we will." Rarity agreed before stepping up to Sunset and giving her a stern look. "But first, I demand an apology for what happened at the last spring fling." So what is this? Was this it? Were they going to demand apologies from her for every bad thing she'd done? Why? Just to humiliate her? She felt a flare of anger shot up through her body, and she clenched her fist but took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Sure, this wasn't how she wanted to spend her lunch break, but she supposed she deserved it. I'm sorry about that, Rarity," she answered, looking away. "I shouldn't have made that awful video about you just to become the spring princess." A few tense seconds passed as Sunset felt Rarity's eyes scanning her, evaluating her. She just hoped she wouldn't say anything about the ragged clothes she'd worn to the fall formal and was still wearing now. Although she'd cleaned them, her jacket looked specially torn. Then again, could she complain if Rarity made fun of her outfit? She'd done far worse herself. "Oh, I forgive you." A pair of hands landed on her shoulders, and Sunset flinched, looking up to see Rarity smiling at her, which took her off guard. Then the girl's eyes flickered to Sunset's outfit, But darling, you absolutely had to let me make you new clothes. Look at what you're wearing. Rarity, Applejack said in a warning tone. Right, right, baby steps. She looked at her friend with a sheepish smile and then let go of Sunset. But perhaps we could start with a shopping trip at least. Sunset wanted to scoff. Shopping trips? As if she had the money for that. But that wasn't the most pressing matter. What on earth did all these girls want from her? They said something about a promise to Twilight. Had they promised to keep an eye on her? Make sure she wouldn't go full demon mode again? The thought made the angry flare inside of her grow even larger. But she didn't say anything. All right, listen. Applejack spoke to Sunset this time, apparently sensing her growing apprehension. We promised Twilight that we would try and be friends with you. What a nice way to say that they'll keep you under tight vigilance. A voice inside Sunset's head said bitterly. Although some of us still think it's a terrible idea, Rainbow reiterated, looking at Sunset with utter distrust. But everyone deserves friends, Pinkie Pie spoke this time. Especially Grumps. She then offered Sunset a cupcake that she'd gotten out of her hair. Sunset almost gagged at the thought of eating something that had been inside someone's hair, but it was rare that she'd get to eat anything other than the lunch served at the cafeteria, much less something sweet, so she took it. See? Come on, turn that frown upside down. Pinkie giggled, booping Sunset's nose with her finger. The girl took a step back. Thanks, she ended up saying as politely as she could, looking first at Pinkie Pie and then the others. I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll be better off alone. Well, we tried, Rainbow shrugged, a smile on her face as she turned and started to walk away, only for Applejack to grab her by the collar of her shirt and keep her in place. We aren't asking, darling, Verity spoke, placing her hands on her hips like a strict professor. Like it or not, you'll be part of our friend group until you know what friendship truly is. Sunset scowled. Great. Will you grade me too? Hey, that's not a bad idea, Pinkie laughed. Sure, and if she fails, we get to hit her with a ruler. Rainbow joked, but it was clear that she actually wanted to do that. For now, why don't you just come sit with us? Rarity stirred the conversation back on topic. You don't even have to talk if you don't want to, Applejack assured her. Just give it a try, all right? Sunset sighed, looking at her salad bowl, and then at a group of friends. She wanted to refuse to grab her salad and go eat at the restroom or something, as pathetic and unhygienic as that be. But the lunch break was almost over, and if she didn't eat now, she'd have to wait until the next day, or spend some of the precious few coins she had to buy something cheap later. She supposed that simply sitting next to the girls who had defeated her would be a better choice. Sure, she grumbled, before grabbing her tray and following the girls to their table, where she ate and sulked in silence until the bell relieved her of her duty. Rarity and Applejack didn't try to include her in the conversation. Rarity and Applejack did try to include her in their conversation, but after a couple of curt answers, they mercifully left her alone. At least she got another cupcake from Pinkie Pie, just as good as the last one, and surprisingly with no hairs, which was the only good thing to come out of this ordeal. Well, if their goal was to teach her a lesson about friendship, then congratulations, they had succeeded. Loneliness hurt the most when it's Loneliness hurt the most when it's sat in the middle of a group of people who all belonged to each other and had no place for you. Sunset hadn't felt this low since the night of the fall formal, but she forced herself to swallow the tears and to appear calm. Just a few more hours of school. Just a little longer. She could survive that. After classes were over, Sunset stayed at school 2 more hours to do some manual labor, as part of her punishment for what she had done. This time it was just painting a wall, which, although tiring, was at least easier than carrying around construction materials all day like she'd done the previous week. Thankfully, the school provided her with an old janitor's uniform to do it, because otherwise her clothes, which were already in a pathetic state, would be ruined further. As Sunset walked to her house, she sighed heavily. She really needed to buy new clothes before Rarity made her new ones and forced her to wear them. No doubt a frilly dress or something just as ridiculous. The only problem was that she had very little money, and her main means of acquiring this resource in the past had been to bullying her classmates into giving her money. Mainly microchips and Fluttershy. Obviously, that was out of the question now. She could try and get she could try and get back with Flash. After all, he had been kind enough to buy her pretty much everything she asked for. But no, it wasn't in her nature to beg, and so she wouldn't. By the looks of it, she'd actually have to find a real job. Or not. Who cares anyway? What did she even need money for? Clothes? The ones she had worked just fine. Even if they were a little ragged. As she got into the small, dirty old place she called home, she tossed her jacket and boots into the same dusty corner where all her things ended up, and then went up the creaking wood stairs and into the little alcove where her bed was. Well, perhaps bed was a bit generous for what it really was. A plain old mattress with a cover thrown over it. She wanted nothing more than to lay on it right away, but she couldn't risk dirtying it. So she took off her clothes, put on her PJs, and then finally lay down with a tired sigh, only to shoot up into a sitting position a moment later when she felt the familiar stinging pain of the wounds on her back, from where the demonic wings had once sprouted. Damn it. Even after living with them for almost a week, she still managed to forget sometimes. She decided to lay down again, however. This time she remembered to lay on her stomach. She had some homework to do, but then again, what was the point of doing homework? On going to school? Anything, really. When she first came into this world, her main objective had been to show that stupid mentor of hers that she was so much better and powerful than her, and make her regret not turning her into an alicorn by conquering this new world and ruling it. Celestia was a spineless coward who had never been here, but Sunset Shimmer, the best unicorn to ever live, would soon rule it all. What a pathetic plan. It hadn't taken her even 2 nights, aimlessly wandering around the streets, to realize just how stupid she had been. Then her other plan materialized in her head. The plan she actually tried to implement, and of course, that plan had been just as pathetic as the last one, and now she was completely lost. She had no path ahead, no purpose, no desire, nothing. She might as well be dead. Oh shit, did I just... Okay, I didn't close it. So far, I'm really appreciating the dialogue and the dynamics between the characters. I think they're very accurate to the source material, and kind of everyone gets to pitch in, and there's no like obvious favorites, of course, because sometimes people just write their favorite character, saying everything, doing everything, and what else? One gripe I could have is that this is starting like a lot of the fan fictions, not a lot, but I've read one other Sunset Shimmer fic, and it kind of started the exact same way with right after the demon, and then she like just goes home, or she's like, oh, she doesn't understand friendship, and she goes home to her kind of kind of her like a tent or something, or like something like very broken down. I don't have the words to describe what I'm trying to think of. Something, like she goes back to her place, but it's not really like a real house or anything. That's a very common thing I've noticed. Okay, that's really all I have to say. So that's not reading again. Then her other plan materialized in her head. The plan she had actually tried to implement. And of course, that plan had been just as pathetic as the last one. And now she was completely lost. She had no path ahead, no purpose, no desire, nothing. She might as well be dead. The hum of the city outside her window sounded distant, unreal, like another world she wasn't even part of anymore. No, at least death would be merciful, she thought sourly. She was very much alive, and as such she was able to feel regret, pain, shame, and anger. Especially anger. As she lay down in her bed just thinking, the anger she'd been feeling all day finally caught up to her. Her classmates were unbearable, whispering, glaring, snickering whenever she passed. They reminded her of just how far she'd fallen from the greatness she once imagined for herself. One had even pegged her with a crumpled paper ball in class. Another left some chewed gum on her chair, like it was some grand joke. They made it so hard not to slip back into old habits, to bare her teeth, to remind them why they used to flinch when she walked by. But after the fall formal, after her public humiliation, fear wasn't something she could command anymore. Not without crossing a line that would land her in real trouble. Even worse than contempt, however, which Sunset could at least understand, was the fake kindness given to her by Twilight's friends. Don't worry, Sunset. We promise Twilight to be your friend, Sunset. We'll keep an eye on you and make sure you don't go full villain again, Sunset. Ugh, how she hated them. They didn't actually want to be friends with her, would they? Why would they? To them, she was a problem to manage, a monster to keep under control, or worse, a charity case to fix. Well, she didn't need them. She didn't want their friendship. She had always hated when people looked down on her with pity, and she was sure that at least 3 out of 5 were doing that. Rainbow Dash, as annoying as she was the only one who didn't bother to hide her hatred for her, and Fluttershy was too scared to even try to talk to her. The other 3, however, were a pain in the ass. She didn't need friends. She never had. And even if hypothetically she ever wanted some company, her last choice in the entire world would be those 5. Ugh. Sunset got out of bed, too restless to keep laying down, and went downstairs into her little bathroom. She took some water from a bucket she kept in there and splashed the cold liquid on her face before leaning on the sink and looking at her jagged reflection in the broken mirror. As expected, she looked as tired and pathetic as she felt, like a washed-up homeless little pony. She hated it. She hated herself. Sunset glared at her own reflection, gripping the sink tightly, trying to ignore the feeling of her throat burning and her eyes stinging. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't. She refused to sound like some pathetic, sniveling loser. This was Sunset Shimmer. She was Celestia's prized pupil. She was the most talented unicorn in all of Equestria. Except, she wasn't. Not anymore, not again. She was just a stupid girl who lost everything. Finally, the pitiful sobs fought their way up her throat and out of her mouth, and tears fell down her eyes. She covered her face with her hands, trying to silence herself, to muffle those pathetic whimpers escaping her mouth, to conceal her tears and her pain, even if no one else was there to see her break down. Ugh! She snarled angrily and slammed her hands down on the sink, uncaring about the pain it caused to hit solid porcelain. I hate you. She shouted at her distorted reflection in the mirror. You just had to ruin everything, over and over again. She practically growled at herself, and she could have sworn her fangs looked more prominent than usual today. You couldn't come up with a better plan, could you? She kept on with her rant against herself while tears, hot as lava, kept pouring down her bloodshot eyes. It wouldn't have worked, even if I made it. It wouldn't have worked even if I made it to Equestria. I was so stupid. She closed her eyes tightly and more sobs came out of her lips, followed by desperate, futile attempts to regulate her breathing. She was so angry, so full of hatred, mainly at herself, that she could have sworn the skin in her hands were literally boiling up. Then this feeling expanded to her cheeks, and finally the heat rose to the tip of her ears. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't looking at herself, but a demon? She jumped back in fright, stumbled with the bucket of water and fell on her rear, with the bucket tumbling over and soaking her pants. But she couldn't care less, because as she looked at her hands, the skin was bright red, and all the way halfway up her forearms and her nails had turned into sharp black claws. She'd seen this before, of course. The fall formal, after putting on the crown and feeling the most excruciating pain she had ever experienced. She had looked at her transformed body and seen these exact same hands. Except this time, the transformation didn't seem complete. But still, there shouldn't be a transformation at all. Twilight took the crown back to Equestria. Sunset had been blasted with the magical rainbow. The demon was no more. It couldn't be. Her breathing started to get faster and shallower. Her heart pounded like she was sprinting for her life. She looked at those awful, unnatural hands and wanted them to disappear, to go away. But still they remained, like a mocking testament of what she had once been, what she still was. She tried to scream, but nothing came except for a rasp of air that scraped her throat. Her chest clenched, shallow breaths hitching faster and faster, until she could barely pull any in at all. She knew she was spiraling, hyperventilating, but she couldn't stop. Panic had her in its grip, choking her. She didn't even want to be a monster. Twilight and her friends weren't there. Magic was no more. If she transformed again, if she was taken over by her, then there'd be no way to stop her, no way of going back. She'd destroy everything and everyone in her wake, until the human world was reduced to ashes. Hadn't she done enough damage for a lifetime as she had? Hadn't she inflicted enough pain? She didn't want to be a monster. She stayed slumped on the wet bathroom floor, gasping as her head spun and every inch of her body burned with pain. She felt so sick, hollow, she wanted to vanish, to stop existing altogether. More than anything, she wanted the monster gone. But Sunset, a sinister voice inside her head spoke, smooth and calm. I can't leave you. I am you. She curled up against the cold tiles, trembling, too afraid to look at her hands again. No, it had to be a lie. It just had to. Because if it wasn't, if Sunset was truly destined to carry this burden until the day she died, she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure she wanted to live at all. So that's the end of the first chapter, but they kind of didn't separate the first and second. Oh, actually, I think AO3 is just different. I think I thought it was like used to have to like press a button to get to the next chapter, but it looks like you can just scroll down now. I should probably take a small break before I start reading again. All right, so I'm back. My thoughts so far is the main point of this first chapter seems to be about basically setting up Sunset's self-hatred and things like that, which is all right, but I'll say I personally find that less interesting. What I find interesting is when I'm like a kind of a romantic type of guy. You know, I like seeing romance be the main focus. So I would prefer like if she was thinking about Twilight more. I don't know, but of course it might change. Of course, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm just saying that that's what I'm interested in with these kind of type of stories. And I think that obviously a lot of these writers that write for Sunset Shimmer, including myself, that we obviously relate to Sunset Shimmer to an extent where we kind of project our own self-doubt and hatred onto Sunset, of course. So it's kind of not surprising to see that the story is being set up this way because people that write fan fiction, they draw from their own experience, and of course people that relate to Sunset might have this experience. So it's not really surprising, but I'm here for Yuri, so I'm hoping there's gonna be more Yuri talk. The next day had the worst beginning in the entirety of Sunset's life, which was saying a lot. She'd woken up, curled on her bathroom floor, wet, freezing, sore, and with her head feeling like it was being torn apart. Her eyes felt so swollen she could barely open them correctly, and her throat felt like it was made of sandpaper. The only good thing was that her friends and face seemed to be back to normal, that her hands and face seemed to be back to normal. No demon in sight. Perhaps it had all been a dream, or hallucination. Great, she was going crazy. She took off her wet PJs and threw them over an empty curtain rack, hanging them to dry, and then went to wash her face. At the very least, it was a relief to get rid of the tears and snot that had been staining her skin. Finally, she went to her bed, grabbed a pair of blue jeans and an orange t-shirt from a small stack of her clothes on the side, and got dressed. She looked outside of her window, the moon shining clearly in the western sky. Definitely too early to go to school yet, but too late to catch some decent sleep, right? She felt too tired, like her bones could barely keep her sitting, much less standing. Just a small nap, it'd be fine. It wasn't fine. Not only had she missed the first period when she woke up, she'd missed pretty much the entire morning. Even when she ran to school as fast as she could, tripping once on her way there, she barely made it to her lunch break. But at least she'd get to eat that day, she thought sourly as her stomach grumbled. She just hoped to be something more substantial than just salad. But as her luck would have it, the lunch that day was indeed salad again, to her growing frustration. Could this day get any worse? Sunset Shimmer! Pinkie Pie's high-pitched voice rang painfully in Sunset's ears, as she heard rapid footsteps coming in her direction from behind. She closed her eyes and braced for yet another bothersome invasion of her personal space, but it never came. Sunset, I thought you didn't come to school today. Sunset opened her eyes slowly, seeing Pinkie's smiling face in front of her. She didn't say anything in response, but she really was glad Pinkie hadn't hugged her again. She wasn't sure how she would have reacted. Come on, sit with us. The girl grabbed the sleeve of Sunset's jacket and started pulling her towards the table with the other girls, because of course she did. Unfortunately, she was too tired to resist, and simply took a seat at the edge of it, next to Pinkie. The others greeted her, but barely acknowledged it with a quiet hum. Hopefully, she'd be able to eat this stupid salad in peace. Wow, you look terrible, Rainbow commented once she was sitting, staring at her rather rudely. Sunset simply glared. Are you okay, darling? Verity asked with concern in her eyes. We were terribly worried when you didn't show up. I wasn't, Rainbow corrected, only for Applejack to elbow her in her ribs. What is this interrogation? Sunset asked grumpily. Sunset asked grumpily as she took her fork. I just want to eat, so if you could all just ignore me, that'd be great. But Sunset, Pinky exclaimed as she got a bag out of her backpack. I brought something for you. The moment she opened the bag, Sunset's eyes widened. It was filled with all sorts of delicious looking pastries, muffins, cookies, cupcakes, tarts, strudels, you name it. And the smell, it was heavenly. Immediately she started salivating and her stomach grumbled despite herself. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made everything, Pinkie Pie announced proudly. I want you to know which is your favorite. I want to know which is your favorite, so I can bring it to you more often. Sunset's eyes widened, alternating between Pinkie and the delicious pile of food in front of her. Was it the healthiest? No, but after surviving 2 years and a half only on cafeteria food, she really didn't care. She hesitantly reached out with one shaky hand, as if afraid this was some sort of cruel joke. But all she got was an encouraging smile from Pinkie as she grabbed the chocolate muffin. Hesitantly, she brought it to her face, taking the amazing aroma of high-quality chocolate before digging in. One bite, and Sunset nearly melted. The muffin was soft, rich, perfectly bittersweet, infinitely better than anything she tasted in years. A sound escaped her, unguarded and blissful. Someone's enjoyed herself, Applejack teased. Pinkie Pie's baking does that, Fluttershy said softly, smiling. The girls watched her with warmth, their usual suspicion oddly absent. Even Rainbow's scowl had softened. For a heartbeat, Sunset almost believed it. She believed she could belong there, laugh with them, be normal. But the next moment that feeling was gone, leaving only an empty void. It was as if something inside of her rejected the idea on a visceral level. How could she ever have friends? How could she ever be normal? How could she deserve forgiveness and happiness when she was so broken? Last night, she had turned into a literal demon for fuck's sake. She couldn't enjoy this. Any of it. It was so wrong. Not even the stupid muffin, which was almost as disgusting as herself. Her stomach turned with the lie. The urge to spit out the food still in her mouth nearly undid her, but she forced herself to swallow, every muscle trembling with the effort of holding herself together. Her throat was swollen and her eyes stung, despite how hard she tried to push back. These were clear signs of an imminent breakdown. Not here, not in the cafeteria, not in front of them. She shoved her chair and bolted, ignoring their calls. She didn't stop running until she locked herself in a bathroom stall, where the tears finally broke loose. She was so sick of crying. Sunset went back to the cafeteria after she forced herself to swallow all of her strained sobs and cleaned up her face as best as she could. At least it had been a relief to not have to deal with any demon transformations this time, hallucinated or not. Part of her hoped that girls would have finished lunch and already left, but of course they were there. Worse even, Sunset's bag and food tray were on their table. She had to face them. She walked forward, dragging her feet, ignoring the hushed voices that erupted all around her when she entered. She really didn't want to know what people thought about her earlier actions. She still managed to pull herself together in just a few minutes, and now she'd hopefully be able to finish her food. As she walked up to the table, the girl stopped whatever conversation they had been having and stared at her with surprise and caution, almost like she was some sort of ghost. The silence stretched to an uncomfortable degree. I. Sunset's voice cracked and she cursed herself as she cleared her throat. I'm back, she announced, rather unceremoniously, as if she needed to announce her presence. The others kept staring at her with the various degrees of awkwardness until Rarity spoke. Why don't you sit down? Sunset accepted the invitation and sat next to Pinkie once more, the amazing bag of sweets gone, however. A quick scan revealed that it was now in the center of the table, most of its contents gone. Sunset felt a pang of pain inside her chest, but didn't say anything. Perhaps it was for the best. A quick look at Pinkie's dejected face confirmed it. She'd ruined everything like she always did. She started eating her salad in silence, not taking the time to savor it all, and finishing rather quickly. At least she hadn't missed her chance to eat. That surely would have soured her day even further. Just as she was grabbing her bag and preparing to go, A pastry was placed on her tray. This one looked like a strudel. She turned at Pinky with a confused expression. I still don't know which one's your favorite, but hopefully you like this. The girl smiled at her. I'll bring you a different one every day, okay? Sunset didn't know what to say. She thought today's fiasco would have been enough to make Pinky stop trying altogether. But here she was, still smiling, still offering, still believing. Something twisted inside of her. This girl was insane. She should have given up on Sunset already. Why would she? Why wouldn't she? And yet her fingers betrayed her. They reached out, wrapping the strudel in a napkin, as carefully as it were glass. Not eating it, not now, but putting it inside her bag, holding on to it. Thank you, she whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. She blinked away, the stupid tears blurring her vision, and she hated herself for them. Before they had a chance to fall, she shoved her bag onto her shoulder and ran away once more, just as the bell rang. She ran from the terrifying warmth that had almost broken her open. After school, Sunset had to continue painting that stupid wall as part of her punishment. So, she put on the usual janitor's uniform, took a brush and bucket of paint, and then started painting. All she really wanted to do was go home. Her eyelids were heavy, her movements sluggish, and her arms trembled from exhaustion at every stroke. Still, she persevered. She knew she had to do this, otherwise who knows what punishment Principal Celestia would come up with. After finishing one section of the wall, she took a moment to swipe the sweat off her forehead and catch her breath. Suddenly, a voice behind her startled her. You know, I've always admired you for being a hard worker, despite everything. Applejack was walking down the hallway. She offered Sunset a gentle smile. The redhead, however, tensed up upon seeing her. Has she come to make fun of her? What are you doing here? She asked defensively. Hey, I was just passing by, honest, she answered, lifting her hands. Classes ended 1 hour ago. Sunset narrowed her eyes with suspicion. I had some homework to finish, and I figured the library would be a better place to do than back at home, Applejack explained, not taking offense to Sunset's guarded attitude. You know, more quiet. I didn't know you frequented the library. The words escaped Sunset's mouth before she could stop them, and then she realized how bad they sound. No offense. None taken, Applejack chuckled. I'm not exactly the bookish type. And then she got closer and leaned on the wall next to Sunset, on the part that didn't have fresh paint. Usually I go to Rarities if I need some peace and quiet, and she's even kind enough to help me with my schoolwork if I need it. But she's busy with a project right now. You two are close, huh? Sunset couldn't help but noticing, not without a slight surprise. The country girl and the fashionista seemed like an odd pair. Well, Applejack looked at her pointedly, but with the smile still remaining on her lips. She was the only one of my friends that you didn't make me hate. Sunset cringed at Applejack's words, at the reminder of just how bad of a person she had been. The truth of the matter was, Sunset would have never imagined that those two were actually close. After all, when their friend group had dissolved, each had started sitting with their own cliques during lunch. She would have never guessed that they were still hanging out after school. Otherwise, she probably would have tried to separate them. Don't sweat about it, Sugar Cube. Applejack patted her shoulder. What's important is that you're trying to do it better now. Sunset took a step back, getting away from Applejack's touch, and deciding it was better to go back to work than to keep talking with her. This girl showing her so much kindness all because of a stupid promise. It was infuriating, really, as if they both didn't know Sunset didn't actually deserve it. So Sunset took her brush once again and started painting, doing her best to ignore the girl standing there, still staring. Why couldn't she just go away? Did she take some kind of pleasure in seeing Sunset working tirelessly into the late afternoon just to atone for her wrongdoings? She supposed she couldn't really blame her if she did. Still, she wanted to be left alone. Let me help you, Applejack said after a moment of hesitation. Sunset's brain was still trying to process those words when she heard Applejack's backpack drop to the ground, and turned around only to see the girl putting on another janitor's uniform and grabbing a brush. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. She was rather stunned when she saw the girl dip her brush in the paint and climb up the metallic ladder to reach the highest part of the wall. Sunset would never admit that she had been dreading to paint that part, considering how much harder it was and that there was always a risk of falling. But no, she shouldn't be grateful. This must be some kind of joke. But it was. If it wasn't, I don't need your pity. The bitter words escaped her as she kept painting. Good. I'm only offering my help. She answered without missing a beat, because that's what friends do. We're not friends, Sunset grumbled, clenching her teeth. You're just being nice to me because some pony princess from another world told you to do it. These words gave Applejack a pause at least, and for a fleeting moment Sunset thought that maybe she had finally managed to shut the girl up by shoving the ugly truth in her face. But Applejack spoke once more. I'll admit it. I wasn't very keen on the idea at first, she answered hesitantly. After everything you'd done, it was hard to believe you deserved a second chance. But Sunset, you reject kindness so harshly, it's kind of sad. Sunset, Sunset's grip around the brush made her ankles turn white. She practically started stabbing the wall with it. So it is pity then. No, it's not. She shook her head, then paused, thinking, and let out a chuckle. Huh. Well, I'd admit, I did used to pity you. Excuse me? Sunset looked up, glaring at the girl, only to see a kind smile on Applejack. Whoa, okay, let me just. Excuse me? Sunset looked up, glaring at the girl, only to see a kind smile on Applejack's face that contrasted with their words. Sunset had expected to be made fun of. I figured all that anger and lashing out didn't come from nowhere, you know? She explained. There had to be a reason why you were so mean all the time. But an abusive parent, although economical situation or something like that. Sunset frowned. Or maybe I'm just a terrible person. Terribly broken, perhaps. The girl went down the stairs to grab some more paint. She had finished the top section while Sunset was only halfway through the bottom one. But I don't pity you anymore. She smiled at the girl. Because despite everything, I can see that you're genuinely trying to get better. And that's something to be admired. Sunset scoffed and kept painting. Despite what the girl was saying, she just couldn't get herself to believe anything she did was actually worth admiring. She was just doing what she had been told. She had stopped being mean. She was repairing the school. That's all there was to it. She wouldn't say there was a better person now than before the fall formal. But even before, you always managed to get the best grades at school. Applejack continued talking as she was climbing up the stairs once more. Many thought you were cheating somehow. But cheating alone doesn't earn you the top spot in everything. She chuckled. And all cheaters get caught eventually. The girl shook her head and looked down at Sunset. Although, I didn't like one bit of all those awful things you were doing. I still knew you were working hard for those grades. If only you could put that same effort into other aspects of your life, I think you'd be an amazing person. Sunset bristled at those words. She wanted nothing more than to reject them, to prove Applejack wrong. But how? She was telling the truth. Sunset never cheated. Not on her exams, not on her homework, or anything else school-related. She didn't need to. She was just better than all these bipedal creatures. She had known all kinds of magic back in Equestria. Earning top grades in everything here should be easy for her, right? Except it hadn't been. Not at first. Countless nights, she stayed hidden at the library reading, trying to learn everything she could about humans, trying to comprehend the differences between her world and theirs, and to memorize centuries of history that was unfamiliar to her. Without all that effort, Sunset would have been an average student at best, and her pride wouldn't have allowed that. Maybe it was time to use that drive to become the best person she could be, and not just the best student. The best person you could be? A sinister voice mocked her. You're not even a person. You're a monster. Sunset physically recoiled at those awful words, knocking over a can of paint in the process, although it was thankfully empty. The clatter was at least something enough to snap her out of those thoughts. She knew that voice. It was something that had. She knew that voice. It was something that had. It was the same that had spoken to her the previous night. She looked down at her hands, half expecting to find sharp claws. Instead, but no, she was human, or at least she looked human. She took a deep breath. You all right there, Sugar Cube? Applejack asked after descending the stairs again. She'd already finished the top part of the wall, all by herself. Sunset could only manage a sniff nod in response, which earned her a skeptical look. Listen, I don't know why you seem so intent on denying yourself happiness, and perhaps it's none of my business, but I don't, came the immediate response, this time making Applejack raise an eyebrow. Care to explain to me what happened today? Care to explain to me what happened today at the cafeteria then? She asked, making Sunset cringe internally at the memory. You were clearly enjoying Pinkie Pie's bacon. And then you suddenly ran off. She shook her head. I think Pinkie Pie can be overwhelming sometimes, but this was something else. Maybe I'm just allergic to chocolate. Sunset tried to deny the obvious. Ugh, sure, I'm allergic to apples. Applejack deadpanned. Then, after staring at Sunset in silence for a moment, she sighed and put away the brush before wiping the sweat off her forehead. Listen, you don't have to tell me, but even back when I didn't have any friends, I still had my family there to support me. She offered her a kind smile. I mean, maybe it ain't parents or siblings for you, but there's gotta be someone. A cousin, aunt, grandparent, heck, even a family friend. Someone's got someone. Everybody's got someone. Her voice softened, almost encouraging. So talk then. Whoever they are. I'm sure it'll help. So talk to them, whoever they are. I'm sure it'll help. Sunset looked away, refusing to acknowledge those words. Applejack busied herself with putting away the janitor's uniform she'd used, clearly preparing to leave, oblivious to the storm she stirred in Sunset's chest. Everybody's got someone? Sunset wanted to laugh, but it got caught in her throat. Instead, the words, almost mocking, simply sat in her chest like a stone. No, Sunset had no family. There was no one waiting for her, no one to turn to, no one who cared. Applejack couldn't seem to imagine a world without that kind of support, but Sunset lived in it every single day. Yet, she had risen above it, hadn't she? She'd grown up without anyone to lean on, earned a place at Princess Celestia's side without anyone to guide her, discovered a whole other world without anyone to help her, and clawed on her way to the top of the school without anyone to share it with. Everything she had, everything she was, she had carved it out on her own. So what if she was alone? She didn't need anyone. She couldn't need anyone. You also don't deserve anyone. The voice inside her head mocks her again. Monsters like you don't get friends. They get cages. Sunset's fists clenched, knuckles burning with heat, but the fire twisted into a sudden stab of pain in her palms. She hissed and yanked her hands up, only to see claws where her nails should have been, long and curved, their tips wet with blood. For a heartbeat, she couldn't even breathe. Then with a desperate jerk, she shoved her hands deep into her pockets, as if that would make them disappear. I'm sorry, Sugar Cube, but I have to go now. Applejack's voice cut through her panic, sharp as a bell. Sunset flinched as the farm girl strode over her, with her bag slung over her shoulder, ready to leave. I hope you finish soon. Sunset simply nodded in acknowledgement, not trusting her voice to speak without breaking. And please think about what I said, all right? Upon receiving another stiff nod, Applejack offered Sunset her hand to shake, steady, patient. See you tomorrow? Sunset stared at it, the gesture almost unbearable. Her fingers twitched, but she didn't care. If by some miracle the claws had already faded, the blood still slicked her palms. What excuse could she possibly give? She stayed frozen, and Applejack's hand fell away. Applejack sighed and turned, footsteps resonating in the empty halls as she walked away. Sunset let out a long, shuddering breath, a relief rushing in. Then stopping short, her chest tightened as she watched Applejack walk away. Not because she wanted help, but because something inside of her twisted at the thought this might be their last exchange. Applejack! The word burst out before she could stop it, making her pause at the door. Regret crashed in immediately, and Sunset's stomach churned. She wasn't good at this. She wasn't good at feelings. She barely even knew what she wanted to say. Thank you. It came out clumsily, but Applejack's smile was warm enough to calm Sunset's unease. Anytime, Sugar Cube. With a wave, she was gone, leaving Sunset alone with the silence. Her hands came out of her pockets at last. They were still bleeding. The wounds were real, the claws were real, and worse, the demon was real. Still inside her, biding its time, waiting to strike. Sunset nearly collapsed to the ground just thinking about it. She would have felt better if it had been just in her mind, even if it had meant she was losing her head. But the blood in her hands served as a testament of how real it was. If it had been possible for Sunset to hate herself even more as she already did, she would have. Chapter 3. Unworthy of Kindness. She was late again. Every night it was the same. The crown clamping down, magic ripping through her veins. Her mind caged inside of a monster's body, always ending in that searing white light. She hated how it still made her wake up trembling and crying like some hopeless foal. It was pathetic, but she couldn't sleep afterwards for a while, and then she overslept again. She really needed to get a new alarm clock. Rushing across the street, she decided to take a shortcut through an alleyway, climbing up a fence in the process. She'd done it plenty of times before, but that day she was pretty tired. Her foot slipped as she was going down, and she instinctively tried to grab the fence again, only for the sleeve of her jacket to get caught in the iron barbs with a distinctive ripping sound. Damn it. Sunset stumbled on her feet as she landed and then inspected the damage. It was a pretty bad tear. Any other person would have probably decided then and there that it was better to finally replace that beaten old jacket already. But as it turns out, Sunset had nothing to replace it with, and truthfully, the thought of replacing it made something twist in her chest. Stupid. It was just fabric. Back in Equestria, she hadn't even worn clothes. But this jacket had been hers from the moment she first stepped through the portal, back when everything had felt new and full of possibility. She loved how it looked, how it felt, how it made her feel sharp, untouchable, whole. Now it was faded, fraying, barely holding together, much like... She cut the thought off with a sharp breath. It didn't matter. It wasn't supposed to matter. And yet the sight of it ripped open left her with a dull ache she couldn't explain away. Perhaps a bit of glue would be enough. It's not like she had the money to buy a new one anyway, so it wasn't worth it to even look for one. She sighed as she passed the school doors, thankfully still on time, but hurried her pace. She needed to retrieve her books and then make it to class. After taking her stuff from her locker, she pushed through the crowd of students, barely paying attention to where she was going, and so suddenly she collided with someone. "Hey, watch it," she yelled angrily at the person, only to realize too late that it was none other than Fluttershy. Not that she cared. Why would she care? The girl looked as small and pitiful as always, a reminder of everything Sunset couldn't stand to see in herself. I'm sorry," Fluttershy squeaked out and bent down to pick up her stuff. With a sigh, Sunset did the same. She didn't have time to waste getting angry at such a pathetic girl. As she was picking up her books, she saw that one of the items that had fallen was Fluttershy's wallet. She recognized it because of how many times she'd taken it from the girl, grabbed the money, and then tossed it back. Her hand reached for it before she could stop herself, like an old habit that she couldn't shake off. She paused for a moment. It could be so easy. Grab whatever money she had, threaten her into silence, and then use the money for whatever she needed. A new jacket, new alarm clock, maybe even some food. What would it matter? Fluttershy could just ask her parents for more money anyway. Sunset had no one. She was doing this out of necessity, out of survival. She looked up determined and fixed the other girl with a mean stare. Fluttershy instantly flinched, her whole body curling in on itself, like she actually expected Sunset to hurt her. The sight stopped Sunset cold. For a split second, she wasn't looking at Fluttershy at all. She was staring into a mirror. As she was picking up her books, she saw that one of the items that had fallen was Fluttershy's wallet. Oh, I read that already. Hold on. Her chest tightened. She had been about to what? Threaten her? Intimidate her? Steal from her? All for a few coins that wouldn't even make a difference. The realization hit like a gut punch. She hadn't escaped anything. She hadn't changed. She was the same monster she'd always been, just wearing a crumbling mask. With a snarl of disgust, she shoved the wallet into Fluttershy's hand, hard enough to make the girl stumble. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out without a word, as if distance alone could wash the shame off her skin. Faintly, she heard a whisper follow her. "Thank you." The words hung there, fragile and uncertain. Gratitude? Relief? Or was it a trembling acknowledgement that she hadn't been attacked? Sunset didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. She couldn't tell if she had done something good for once, or if she had just reminded the girl how dangerous she could be. At lunch, Sunset grabbed her burger, finally, something substantial for once, and went to sit at the table with the 5 other girls. No point on trying to distance herself. Pink or Applejack would surely drag her there themselves if she tried to. As she arrived, she chose to say nothing, however, Instead, she just gave a nod of acknowledgement as she scanned their faces. She didn't miss how Fluttershy shrunk a bit when her eyes landed on her, or how Rainbow Dash positioned herself as if to shield herself from Sunset's gaze. Whatever. Sunset sat down and tried to get that visual out of her mind. It didn't hurt. It was fine. She'd just have to eat as fast as possible and get out of there right away. At least that was her plan. Pinkie interrupted it almost immediately. Sunset, Sunset! She practically yelled at her ear. Did you like the strudel? Huh? Sunset stared at the girl's smiling face for a moment, processing her question and looking back at the moment she'd eaten the pastry the previous night. She couldn't say that it was the best dinner she ever had, but it had certainly helped stave off the hunger, and its sweetness had given her a little comfort. Oh, yeah, it was all right. Pinkie's disappointed face immediately told her she'd said the wrong thing. Aw, bummer, the girl pouted. I really thought I'd get it on the first try. Before Sunset could ask what she was talking about, another pastry was shoved into her hands, this time a donut covered with chocolate frosting and colorful sprinkles. Here, maybe this will be more to your liking. Pinkie smiled at her. Thanks, she said awkwardly, taking the donut and wrapping it with a napkin, just like she'd done with the previous day, before putting it in her bag. She couldn't risk another breakdown. You're very welcome, Pinkie smiled enthusiastically. I have faith in this one. Many people have told me it's perfect for when you're feeling down. I'm not feeling down, she denied sharply, making Pinkie flinch. Sorry, I mean, it's good for everything, not just that, she chuckled, trying to alleviate the tension. Sunset simply rolled her eyes and turned her attention back to her burger, hoping to finally be able to get a bite and be left alone. But of course, fate was crueler than that. Sunset, darling, can I borrow your jacket for a second? Sunset sighed upon hearing Rarity's voice, and was tempted to ignore her, but then thought better of it. The girl was so obsessed with the clothes, she wouldn't put it past her to rip her jacket off if it didn't at least try to dissuade her. Why? She snapped at the girl, who was now standing behind her. No doubt, she would comment on how ripped and torn her jacket was, and how she definitely needed a new one. I'm trying to study a new design style, and I think your jacket could give me some inspiration, that's all, darling, she explained. It'll only be a minute, darling, I promise. Ugh, Sunset wanted to say no, maybe flip her off and tell her to get lost. But she was trying to be better, right? And she'd rather avoid having a confrontation that would prevent her from eating lunch in peace. So she took off her jacket and practically threw it at Rarity's hands. At least the way the girl fumbled with it for a moment before properly catching it gave her a tiny bit of satisfaction. Sunset then turned back towards her burger and finally dug in, enjoying her meal in peace at last, for a whole 3 seconds. Oh dear, what on earth happened here? Rarity's voice interrupted her, voice full of concern. Sunset put her burger down and glared at the girl with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Rarity, however, didn't even flinch. She was too focused on the tear that had appeared on the jacket sleeve earlier. A tear that Sunset had tried to repair with a bit of glue and masking tape. She couldn't help but feeling a bit of shame at Rarity's judgmental look as she gazed at the handmade repairs. It broke, she stated as a matter of fact, and then tried to grab her jacket, only for Rarity to back away, putting it out of her reach. Oh no, this is a disaster, she cried, like she was witnessing the most distressing tragedy in the history of fashion. I can't allow you to go around wearing this. Well, I don't need your permission. Annoyed, Sunset tried to get out of her chair and chase after the other girl if necessary, just to get her beloved jacket back, but was held down by Applejack, who looked at her with apologetic eyes. Rarity can be a bit intense, but she's a good seed, she assured her. Just let her work. I promise you won't regret it. Sunset debated for a moment between trusting Applejack and going after Rarity anyways. She didn't want the girl to throw her jacket to the trash or something like that, but as she looked into Applejack's sincere eyes, she felt herself falter. She remembered their conversations from the previous day and slowly sat back down, concluding that the country girl had no reason to be tricking her right now. And so, Sunset grabbed her burger once more and went back to eating, this time keeping her gaze squarely on Rarity, ready to act at the first sign of something being wrong. But to her surprise, the girl simply sat back down on her own chair, pulled out a sewing kit out of her bag, and started working on fixing the ripped-up sleeve. First by undoing Sunset's hasty repairs, and then by stitching it up. Sunset couldn't believe it, honestly. She had thought that Rarity would straight up discard her jacket, maybe even insist on giving Sunset some frilly thing to replace it, but she was repairing it out of her own free will during her lunch break? It made no sense. It was absurd. Still, she had nothing. Too stunned by what she was seeing to actually react. Even more absurd and impressive, however, was the fact that Rarity finished the repairs before lunchtime was even over. The girl got up from her chair, walked towards Sunset, and showcased a now sewn up rip. It was noticeable, but not nearly as much as before, and Rarity had even embroidered this scar with a little golden pattern that resembled flames. Not my finest work, of course, but good enough for now, yes? She smiled, then turned the jacket around in her hands, eyeing it with expert eyes. I could repair the rest of it with enough time, she mused. But for now, I suppose it'll have to do. She nodded, satisfied with her work. What do you think? Sunset sat in silence for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then she took the jacket and observed the repair, softly caressing the golden thread. It was shiny, beautiful, almost out of place against the worn fabric. It didn't hide the scar, it framed it, turned damage into decoration like a jewel stitched into rags. Rarity had done this in a blink of an eye and made it look effortless. Meanwhile, Sunset's own clumsy attempts had only left the jacket worse and worse than before, just like everything else he touched. Speechless, huh? Rarity smiled, smug. I'll take it as a compliment then. Finally, Sunset shook her head, snapping herself out of her thoughts and forcing herself to look up at the expectant face of Rarity. She truly did not like pity, or charity, or anything that made her feel small under someone else's gaze. But this didn't feel like that. It didn't push her down. It reached out and pulled her up like a hand steadying her when she didn't realize she was falling. Warmth bloomed in her chest, loosening the knots in her shoulders. It felt almost comforting. Thank you, she said, and the words startled her. How often had they been tumbling out of her mouth lately? Once they had been foreign, but now they were stitching themselves into her life, one careful thread at a time. You're very welcome, darling. Rarity smiled. But in return, you absolutely have to promise me you'll consider going to the mall with me sometime. At those words, Sunset cringed. It seemed like she had celebrated too soon. Your style is fabulous already, but I'm sure I could find something to make it even more so. Thanks, I'm good, she grumbled, putting on her jacket and getting ready to leave. Hey. Applejack put her hand on Sunset's shoulder, making her look at her. Rarity is trying, okay? I know shopping might not be your thing, but believe me, it's not mine either. But just think about it, will you? Sunset's eyes hardened as she pulled away. Inside, her chest twisted with a mixture of dread and stubborn pride. She couldn't. She was a pathetic echo of what she once pretended to be, all patched up, fragile, without a penny to her name. At school, it was manageable. There were ways to mask her misery with apathy, but at the mall, among all the normal people with their perfect normal lives, she stuck out like a sore thumb. She glared at the pair of unlikely friends. There's nothing to think about, she said, sharper than she meant. The words tasted bitter the moment they left her mouth, but she didn't take them back. As she walked away, her eyes briefly glanced down at the repaired sleeve, and she felt a pang of regret inside of her. Rarity had gone out of her way to repair this ugly thing, to make it something beautiful again. And yet, Sunset would never enjoy even a simple, normal outing to the mall with them. She couldn't. Just another testament to how she never fit in. I got a burp. After school, Sunset had to do some more wall painting as a part of her punishment, but thankfully she finished relatively early that day, so at least the sky was still somewhat bright when she exited the school. The only problem was, there were big black storm clouds looming above. She just hoped she'd be able to get to her place before it started raining. She picked up her pace walking down the street, focused on making it to safety as soon as possible, but then a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. Come on, little kitty, come here. Sunset looked to the side and saw Fluttershy. Come on, little kitty, come here. Sunset looked to the side and saw Fluttershy standing under one of the many trees that stood next to the school campus, holding up her arms and looking at a patch of orange fur that had nestled on one of the tree's branches. It's gonna rain soon. Please let me take you somewhere safe. The girl's voice was soft and welcoming, but the cat didn't seem to be getting down anytime soon. Had she been trying to get him to come down ever since class ended? Sunset shook her head, pushing out any thoughts about the pink-haired girl, and briskly continued her walk. Whatever was going on, it was definitely none of her business. If Fluttershy intended to stand there until freezing rain came down the sky just to help a kitten, then that was definitely not Sunset's problem. And yet, Sunset's steps faltered, her conviction gone. She told herself she didn't care about Fluttershy's predicament. Why would she? But she had always had a soft spot for animals. Not that she'd ever admit it, and the thought of a poor little kitten getting all wet from freezing rain and potentially falling off that tree made her uncomfortable. Um, I don't know if this is like a thing that was said in the movies or something, but this is like something I've been reading, like noticing. It says Sunset is like into animals, not into animals, but like protective animals. Is that like a thing that happened? I don't remember that, but okay. Her feet shifted, now facing towards Fluttershy away from the path that would take her home. She looked at the cat, then the road, then the cat again, and sighed. Surely she'd have time before the rain came, right? Dragging her feet and convincing herself that helping the cat was worth it, she arrived next to Fluttershy, the girl who still seemed to fear her. Truthfully, Sunset wasn't even sure she'd accepted her help. She'd accept her help, but she didn't really care. She was doing this for the cat, and so she'd help whether the girl wanted it or not. I'll get down, Sunset said, in a statement, not a question. I'll get it down, the Sunset said, a statement, not a question. The other girl yelped, startled, but was promptly ignored as Sunset began to climb the tree. Please be careful, Sunset said. Fluttershy said after she got over the initial shock and realized what Sunset was doing. I don't think my Fluttershy voice is that good. I don't know. Please be careful. Please be careful. No. I don't know how to like. Oh, please be careful. I don't know. That wasn't that good. Please be careful. Just please be careful. I don't know. Sunset rolled her eyes. Sure, she was a bully, but she wasn't a monster. She wouldn't hurt the cat. She knew what she was doing. Thankfully, the tree wasn't that tall, and the trunk was sturdy enough, so Sunset could easily make it to where she needed to be. The small orange kitten was curled up on one of the branches, trembling from either cold or fear. Ears flattened against his head and teal eyes looking at sunsets with distrust. Sorry, just my English is so bad lately. I don't know what it is. Sunset reached out with her hand, ready to grab it, but the cat hissed and showed its tiny teeth in defiance. Sunset hissed right back and grabbed it by the skin at the back of its neck in one swift motion. She didn't have time to deal with this distrustful nature. She kept holding it like this as she went down from the tree, not careful not to fall. Once she was safely on the ground again, she presented the kitty to the other girl. Thank you. Fluttershy smiled at her with a sincere, warm expression. Then she looked at the kitten and reached out, ready to grab it, only for it to lash out with its paws defensive. Oh dear. Fluttershy's eyes whitened. I should probably get something to transport him in. Rolling her eyes and knowing that she didn't have time for this girl to go search for a box or something, Sunset got her hand that wasn't holding the kitten out of her jacket sleeve, then used the garment to wrap up the kitten until she could let go of its skin safely and fully get her jacket off, now just holding him like a black leather burrito. She offered the wrapped-up kitten to Fluttershy, but the girl hesitated. Can you come with me to the shelter? She asked. It's not far away, and you'll be able to get your jacket right after he's settled down. Truthfully, Sunset wished to do nothing of the sort, but if she was honest with herself, being without her jacket made her feel quite naked, and she didn't wish to part with it more than necessary. So she summarized she had no choice but to do as Fluttershy suggested, unless she wanted to leave her prized piece of garment with the girl until next morning, which, yeah, that absolutely was not happening. Wordlessly, Sunset started walking, looking straight ahead and not making conversation. The other girl followed swiftly, struggling to match her timid steps with Sunset's determined ones. Truth be told, the redhead had hoped Fluttershy would remain her quiet self during the whole way to the shelter, but surprisingly, it didn't take long for her to start to speak, albeit hesitantly. That was very kind of you. The girl's soft, warm voice made Sunset clench her teeth. I didn't do it for you, she blurted out, rather harshly. Fluttershy's tone, so gentle, so surprised, I'm gonna cough, No, I'm not. Dug under her skin like a thorn. Surprised of Sunset's kindness, surprised that monster had a heart. I know. Now Fluttershy's eyes were looking at her with a somewhat sad expression, before they went back down towards the kitten, smiling. You did it for him. Yeah, Sunset said, as a matter of fact. Where was Fluttershy going with this? I understand, the girl nodded. Oftentimes, it's easier to show your truest self to these little ones. Sunset pursed her lips, not liking what Fluttershy was insinuating, especially because she made it seem like she could relate. You really like animals, don't you? Okay, I don't know who said that. Okay. You really like animals, don't you? Said the girl. Girl asked, now looking at Sunset again. Truthfully, the redhead had never seen her be so relaxed around her, which both relieved and upset her. Sunset shrugged, trying not to meet her eyes. Sort of. Fluttershy hesitated, then glanced at the kitten. Well, if you ever want a little friend of your own, the shelter has so many who need a loving home. Her voice was gentle, almost apologetic, as if afraid the suggestion might be too forward. Someone like you could make a big difference for them. Sunset stared at her with wide eyes. Was the girl seriously suggesting that she, Sunset Shimmer, the terror of Candlelock High, the girl who literally turned into a fiery demon not even 2 weeks ago, should adopt one of the precious animals Fluttershy cared so much about? What, just because she rescued one stupid kitten? It was ridiculous. She wanted to scoff, to laugh at her, to tell her how stupid she was for trusting her so quickly. But as she looked down at the kitten in her arms, even as it was still biting her jacket with the ferocity of a lion, she couldn't help actually considering the offer. It would sure be nice to not go home to an empty building, have a small fluffy creature who actually gave a damn about her, and would greet her enthusiastically, and maybe even cuddle with her as she studied or slept. But at the same time, who was she kidding? She could barely take care of herself as it was. Where would she get money for its food or for when it needs to go to the doctor? Most importantly, what if she turned into a demon and hurt it? She certainly wouldn't forgive herself if that happened. No, as much as it hurt to admit, any animal would be better off in the street than living with her. Sorry, but no, she answered quietly. Oh, well, Fluttershy seemed disappointed by her answer, but tried to mask it with a smile. If you ever change your mind, I'd be happy to help you choose one. Sunset simply hummed and was content to remain silent the rest of the way to the shelter. It wasn't that far anyways, and soon they were stepping inside the place. She had never been there, although she'd passed by multiple times, and as usual it was empty besides the two of them, and the receptionist and the animals on their living spaces. Hi, Fluttershy greeted the woman. We brought a new one. I was starting to worry you weren't coming, the girl said with a smile. I trust you take care of it properly. Upon receiving a nod from the girl, she was about to go back to whatever she was working on in her computer, but then remembered something and called out to her before the two girls could go towards the back of the establishment. And don't forget to feed the animals. As soon as the girls entered the space where the animals were kept, most of them in cages or tanks, Fluttershy got to work, running around, grabbing food from different bags and putting it into the respective animals' bowls. Then she also filled their water recipients as the animals started to eat. Sunset wasn't surprised that most of them were cats and dogs, but she noticed that they also had quite a variety of birds, rodents, reptiles, and other such critters. As she looked around, she couldn't help but smiling at their cute, happy faces when they ate, so as much so that she wasn't annoyed that Fluttershy left her waiting here. So much so that Fluttershy wasn't annoyed that so much so that she wasn't annoyed that Fluttershy left her waiting here. Sorry about that. The girl returned to her side. They can get quite cranky if they don't get their food in time. Sunset simply nodded in acknowledgement. Especially since we've been rationing the food lately, so they're not getting as much as they like. Why is that? Sunset couldn't help but ask, as Fluttershy led through yet another door and towards a place that seemed to be designed to clean up animals. Well, our money comes mostly from voluntary donations that people make when they adopt an animal, or bring them here to get their shots or get cleaned, she explained. But lately, there haven't been many adoptions, and the number of animals keeps growing, so yeah. She trailed off a sad expression on her face. Sunset frowned, looking at the little cat in her arms, and worrying that the shelter might not have enough resources to take care of him properly. Sure, he'd still be better off than on the streets or with Sunset, but it worried her regardless, and she found herself wishing there was something she could do to help. Allow me, Fluttershy said, presenting her hands for Sunset to put the kitten in. I'll clean him up and put him in his temporary cage until the veterinarian comes back tomorrow and has time to examine him and make sure he's not sick. Sunset nodded, although reluctantly. She passed the kitten on to Fluttershy, although she missed the weight and the warmth of the small creature almost instantly. She said nothing and simply watched as the girl unwrapped the jacket and then handed it back to Sunset. As soon as the critter was free, however, and before Fluttershy could prevent it, he immediately growled as he pounced on her hand and captured it, biting it ferociously and holding it in place with its sharp claws. Fluttershy hissed in pain and recoiled slightly, but held up her hand to keep Sunset from interfering, looking at the kitten intently as she tried to decide what to do. After a few seconds of breathing deeply and trying to remain calm despite the vicious attack, she used her hands to gently caress the kitten's fur, and then spoke soft, sweet words to him in that gentle voice that was so characteristic of the girl. It's okay, little one. You're safe here. Sunset watched in fascination as the kitten's hairs, which were standing up, slowly but surely began to go back into a more relaxed position. I know you're scared, she cooed. You've been here alone for a long, haven't you? A kind smile followed a gentle scratch between the ears. But I'm here to help you. You can trust me. After a few minutes of this affectionate, soothing treatment, the kitten finally seemed to calm down. Slowly, he let go of Fluttershy's hand, relaxed his paws, and let his ears return to an upright position. He even started licking the girl's hand apologetically. Sunset couldn't help but be somewhat impressed by how quickly her classmate had managed to tame this ferocious kitty. If it was her, she probably would have just locked him in a cage and hoped he'd be calmer the next morning. He just needed a little bit of love. Fluttershy answered the unspoken question, looking at Sunset like she knew exactly what she was thinking. You'd be surprised to see the difference that just a little kindness can do sometimes. I guess, Sunset shrugged, tried to appear indifferent, but still kept staring at the cat, who was now happily letting Fluttershy pet him. I know that the only reason he lashed at me was because he was scared, the girl kept explaining. He probably hadn't received affection before, so he didn't know what to expect of it. He saw it as a threat. A happy purr made the girl smile softly at the creature. He tried to appear big and ferocious to scare me, to push me away. She looked pointedly at Sunset. But I know he was just hurting deep down, and oftentimes, aggression is a defense mechanism to mask loneliness. Sunset felt a chill run down her spine, and her limbs went numb. For a moment, she wasn't sure if Fluttershy was talking about the kitten anymore. It was like she was looking deep into her soul. Her hands started trembling, but she clutched her fists and tried to remain expressionless as possible. Yet the girl continued. So I don't mind that he scratched me, she giggled. He hurt me, yes, but only because he didn't know any better. A pause. Fluttershy turned to fully face Sunset, while holding the tame kitten in her hands. But if he lets me teach him what kindness is like, someday he might even realize that he doesn't need to hurt anyone to feel safe. Or maybe, Sunset muttered, trying for a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. He's just waiting for the right moment to bite you again. Maybe. Fluttershy's voice was light, but her gaze was steady. But I still think everyone deserves a second chance, even when it's hard. Even if they hurt you. Sunset's brows furrowed. Now that was just too obvious. Of course Sunset was talking about her. Of course her stupid words resonated so deeply inside of Sunset. Of course she had to use this stupid little critter as a metaphor about how the former bully only needed kindness and love, and suddenly everything would be better. Could she be any sappier? Sunset wanted to throw up. And yet, deep down, she knew Fluttershy was right. That truth stabbed her in the chest, sharp and undeniable. But Sunset just wasn't ready to face that. Not now. The thought that she looked as pathetic as she felt, that she'd always been just as scared and alone, as helpless and scared and alone. Okay. But she wasn't ready to face that. Not now. The thought that she looked as pathetic as she felt, that she'd always been just as scared and alone as this helpless little creature, and that it was just why she became so cruel. No, she wouldn't allow it. She would bury it, shove it so deep down that not even Fluttershy could pry it loose. Maybe you should give your second chance to someone who cares and stop with your sappy metaphors. The words spilled out like venom before she could stop them, her jaws clenching tight as anger and fear twisted together. Sunset, Fluttershy whispered, her expression hurt. No! The girl stomped her foot, moving forward and making the shorter girl take a fearful step back. You really think that just because I helped you earlier, that means we're friends? Her laugh was bitter, hollow. You really think I've changed? That I'm not a horrible person, a monster? She shook her head, throat tight, eyes stinging. This morning I seriously considered taking your money for fuck's sake. The words were venomous, but inside, a pang of shame shot through her chest. She wanted to swallow them back, wanted to apologize, but it just felt impossible. But you didn't, Fluttershy protested, putting the kitten aside and taking a very hesitant, very small step forward. I know you were trying, and I'm trying too. Slowly, carefully, she lifted a shaking hand and tried to put it on Sunset's shoulder, only for it to be slapped away by a bigger red one. Instantly, Fluttershy took a step back and cradled her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Shut up! Sunset growled like a ferocious animal and showed off her elongated canine teeth. Shut the fuck up. The words left her mouth before she could think, scorching and painful. Her eyes bored into the poor girl in front of her like pointed daggers. She couldn't even sheath back. You don't know the first thing about me. You think we can be friends? You think I can just be tamed like an animal? Well, you're wrong. Angry tears fell from Sunset's eyes as she pointed a clawed finger towards Fluttershy. You fear me. You hate me. You will never be able to trust me. You're just right. You're right to feel that way. So stop pretending. Even as she screamed, a tiny part of her flinched at the truth of her own words. She hated how much she wanted to be understood and how terrified she was to be seen. As Sunset advanced, Fluttershy stepped back and cowered her gaze, trying to hold back her tears but failing miserably. However, this moment was interrupted when the kitten, who had been witnessing the entire exchange, hissed at Sunset, tail raised, hairs on end, obviously stressed and ready to attack. And what are you looking at? She yelled fiercely at the creature, now directing her anger towards it. You're just a pathetic, lonely little cat who will never amount to anything. Be better off dead. Sunset's hand came down and hit the table with a loud metallic thud. Her claws pierced the steel, and the kitten yelped, jumping into Fluttershy's arms for protection. Only then did Sunset realize what she was doing. I don't know why I keep wanting to make the th sound and everything. I don't know. I don't know if it's like Spanish. I don't know. She blinked her eyes. She blinked away her tears and took inside of. Okay, let me just take a small break. She blinked away her tears and took in the sight of the girl's scared face, wet with tears, the whimpering kitten in her arms, and, most importantly, the claw marks in the table. Her blood ran cold, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. Her claws twitched involuntarily, and for a horrifying moment she felt the heated tension of the demon that lurked beneath her skin, that part of her she could never fully tame. Her breathing hissed as a shiver ran down her spine. What if this was it? What if everyone finally saw what she really was, and there was just no coming back from it? Without thinking, she bolted, running out of the shelter and through the freezing rain, letting it drench her, letting it wash away the evidence of tears she could hardly bear to acknowledge. But no amount of water could erase what she had done. She had lashed out at Fluttershy, the kindest, gentlest person she knew, and she had let that part of her loose. And she had let that other part of her loose, the part that could terrify, wound, destroy. Perhaps it was for the best. Maybe now her so-called friends would finally leave her alone. That's what she wanted, right? For them to stop pretending that she could be trusted, that she could change. And in the hollow quiet beneath the rain, Sunset realized with a sinking certainty. Now she would definitely get her wish. But the thought of it didn't bring relief. It made her chest tighten even more. She had recklessly shown who she really was. Monsters weren't hugged, weren't forgiven, weren't trusted. They were feared. And now, so would they. Alright, that's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Price of Caution, Warning, this chapter contains depictions of, I don't know if I can say this, depictions of, how do I say this? Friendly fire? I don't know. But like on yourself. It's not detailed. It's mainly psychological, but still, proceed with caution. All right. It was the early Thursday morning, outside of Canterlock High. A group of 5 friends were standing next to the horse statue, at the request of a particular member of the group, someone who usually preferred not to talk too much. But this time she had sent them all a message, telling them to meet before school. It was odd, especially because she didn't give them a reason as to why, so all of them were a bit uneasy as they arrived, especially Rainbow Dash, who got there before everyone else did. Unfortunately for her, however, Fluttershy wouldn't reveal anything to her until everybody was present. Well, Sugar Cube, we're here. Applejack, the last one to arrive, spoke. You mentioned you had something important to tell us. Piggy Pie jumped up and down in excitement. Are you planning to make a surprise party for sunset? I can help. No, Fluttershy's voice was even quieter than usual, and her expression troubled. But it is about sunset. She bullied you again, didn't she? Rainbow Dash spoke with an angry tone, far too eager to blame the girl. I knew we couldn't trust her. Not exactly. The timid girl corrected her. I don't know where to start. She paused, looking at the ground as she tried to find the right words. She didn't want to accuse Sunset of anything, knowing how protective her friends could be, but she also didn't want to pretend like what happened the previous day hadn't affected her. From the beginning, darling. Rarity smiled at her, placing her hands on her shoulders. Come on, you can trust us. We're your friends, after all. Just say what's on your mind. All right. Fluttershy took a deep breath and looked at each of her friends' encouraging faces before giving them a quick summary of what had happened the previous day. From Sunset helping her take the kitten to the shelter, to how she attempted to break through the girl's barriers, to Sunset's subsequent freakout and her progressive behavior, and how much it scared her. She only admitted mentioning anything about the girl's demonic transformation. It's not that she didn't trust her friends with the information. She just knew it wasn't her secret to reveal. That's awful. Good for nothing, stupid. Rainbow was fuming by the end of the story, but a touch on her shoulder from Fluttershy shut her up. I don't blame her, she said. I think she's hurting, more than we realized. I agree, Rarity intervened. I knew getting through Sunset Shimmer wouldn't be easy, but I didn't expect it to be so broken. Applejack supplied, a sad expression on her face. I knew she had some issues, but the past few days have said broken. Applejack supplied, a sad expression on her face. I knew she had some issues, but if the past few days have taught me anything, is that they run way deeper than expected. Poor Sunset. Even Pinky's usual cheerful demeanor had turned somewhat somber upon this conversation. If her issues are really that serious, can we even help her? Rainbow Dash finally uttered her concerns. I don't mean to sound insensitive, but meddling with something we don't understand could do more harm than good, both to her and us. She paused, letting her words sink in. I mean, just look how she responded to Fluttershy. It's not her fault, Dash. The girl in question was reprimanding her gently. I'm not saying that. It's just, she sighed. Fixing some shimmer wouldn't be easy, even if it is possible. I'm just worried she'll end up getting hurt, that's all. That's all. After a long pause, letting her words sink in, Applejack spoke with a grave tone of voice. I hate to say this, but Rainbow has a point. Are you serious? Rarity glared at her, obviously upset by this turn of events. We've tried being her friends for only 3 days, and now you want to give up on her. That's not what I meant, the girl answered defensively. It's just, you saw how she responded to Pinky's pastries? You saw how she ran away from such a simple act of kindness? She frowned. When she came back, it was obvious she had been crying. But she's getting better, Pinky protested. Yesterday she accepted the donut without protest. But then she shut down the offer to go to the mall rather harshly, Apple reminded her. And the other day, after I helped her paint the wall, She couldn't even bring herself to shake my hand. What are you getting at? Rarity frowned. I think we're overwhelming her, she answered in her usual direct way, crossing her arms over her chest. She's just not used to kindness, so every little thing we try to do for her ends up pushing her further and further towards a breakdown instead. Silence engulfed the group as they took in the country girl's words, little by little realizing what this meant and how they could handle the situation going forward. I think you're right. Fluttershy was the first to speak. Sometimes it's best to give a scared animal some space, especially if it's wounded. She reflected on her experience rescuing critters. They usually don't take kindly to being robbed of their freedom and having to deal with situations unfamiliar to them, even if they're positive. I believe the same applies to Sunset. You mean she feels like we're forcing friendship on her? Pinkie Pie asked, and Fluttershy responded with a nod. Huh, like when she didn't like my surprise hug, she mused. Exactly. But we've been holding back, Rarity protested. At least I have. In response, Applejack put a hand on her shoulder and smiled at her. I know you have, but you do have a tendency to move too fast too soon. She gave her a knowing look. I remember you told me how much you wanted to make new clothes for Sunset. I didn't, and I didn't. I just repaired that old jacket, she reminded her. What else was I supposed to do? Let her keep wearing that broken thing? The blonde shook her head. I'm not saying that we shouldn't stop trying altogether. Just be more gentle. Take things slowly. Let her come to us when she's ready. The other girls nodded, agreeing with Applejack's judgment. It made sense. It'd give Sunset some much needed space to process things and get to know them at their own rhythm, without getting overwhelmed. But it didn't mean they will stop trying altogether. They could always still try to help, even if it was in smaller, more subtle ways. All of them liked this plan, except Rainbow Dash. And if she doesn't come to us, can we please just accept that she doesn't want our friendship? She spoke in a highly exasperated tone, crossing her arms over her chest. I know we promised Twilight we would try, and we did. Isn't that enough? Rainbow Dash. Rarity was about to reprimand her, but was promptly cut off. I'm just saying that friendship is a two-way street. And it's fair, it's only us trying to reach out to her, while she keeps pulling away. Her words were harsh, but her tone was sincere. I don't want all of us to exhaust ourselves in a fruitless endeavor, instead of actually experiencing our best high school life. Especially now that we're finally together again. Silence reigned for a few moments as the girls thought about Rainbow's words. It was true that trying to befriend Sunset Shimmer would likely be a daunting task, and they couldn't be sure they would be successful, nor could they know how long it would take. Still, determination shined in all of their eyes. It's precisely because it's difficult that we should keep trying. Fluttershy spoke at last. You know no one else will, and I really want to help her. Pinkie Pie nodded in agreement. I like Sunset, honestly. I think she'd be a great friend, and I'll certainly keep trying. A pause as she gave a sheepish smile. Even if I have to tone down my enthusiasm. Well said, Rarity nodded. Personally, I can't wait until she finally allows me to take her to the mall and make her a new outfit myself, but it'll be all the more rewarding the harder the journey is. Agreed, Applejack nodded. She's a tough nut to crack for sure, but that doesn't mean it's not worth a try. She then looked directly at Rainbow Dash. I know it's not ideal, and I understand you don't want to participate. Rainbow grimaced at her words. You're making it sound like I'm against giving Shimmer a chance, she protested. And I'm not, I'm just... She trailed off, unable to decipher how she felt about the girl. All that she knew is that she didn't trust her yet, especially not around her friends, and that she wasn't comfortable with all of them spending most of their time coming up with ideas to befriend someone who didn't even want to be befriended. It just seemed unfair. We won't force you, but think about it, all right? Applejack offered her a kind smile that Rainbow reciprocated with a forced one of her own. Sure, she ended up saying. With that settled, the 5 girls started making their way to school, ready for their classes to begin. But even as Rainbow Dash walked beside them, her thoughts couldn't be more opposite to them. She didn't like Sunset Shimmer, not one bit. She hadn't forgotten all the awful things she'd done in the past, especially to Fluttershy. And she also wasn't ready to just forgive her yet. No, if Sunset wanted to make friends, it had to be somewhere far from them. Deep down, the thought of Sunset tearing their group apart made her stomach twist. She just couldn't lose her friends again. not everything they'd been through. For now, she'd keep an eye on Sunset, make sure she wouldn't try anything funny on them. When Sunset arrived at school, she was nervous. She never admitted, of course, but she couldn't exactly ignore the way her palms sweated, her stomach turned, and her heart jumped inside her chest. She even considered not showing up in the first place. However, she promptly shut down the idea because she was not scared. Why would she be? Even if Fluttershy had told them what happened, what could those fastidious girls do? They would be the scared ones. They wouldn't even dare to approach her. What was there to fear then? She clenched her fists and closed her eyes, as if that would stop her brain from giving the answer. An answer so obvious she couldn't even pretend not to know. She would be alone once again, shunned by her peers, rejected by her classmates, hated by everyone, as it should be. Thankfully, she didn't encounter them before class started, and while the lectures were ongoing, she didn't dare to look at their direction, afraid of the hate and fear she see in their eyes. Even so, part of her still expected their eyes on her, ready to mock, judge, or whisper behind her back. She clenched her fist beneath the desk, trying to will the claws back into hiding, trying to will herself into not caring, but the fear wouldn't let go. She sat as far away from them as possible and ran out of each class as quickly as she could the moment the bell sounded. If she could avoid confrontation, she would. As lunchtime approached, dread set in, however. There was no escaping that at the cafeteria, no professor to call to silence, no work to immerse herself in as excuse, no crowd of people to block her from view. She had no doubt they'd see her, and they'd either shun her or who was she kidding? There was no other option. She had screwed up, so now she had to deal with the consequences. Then again, why should she care? She was Sunset Shimmer. She had never needed anyone. She didn't even want to be friends with those annoying, stupid, condescending girls. She really couldn't care less if they just stopped talking to her altogether. With those words repeating in her head to give her courage, she stepped into the cafeteria, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. She went directly to grab her food, grabbing a simple hot dog, some mashed potatoes, and then retreated to find some place to sit, except as she glanced at the table where the girls usually sat, she saw 5 pairs of eyes staring directly at her. She deviated her gaze before she could decipher their expression, and quickly went to sit at the furthest place she could find, on a vacant table that would remain so as long as she was there. This she knew by experience. Finally, for the first time this week, she'd be able to eat her lunch in peace. Except as she took a bite from her hot dog, she realized that it barely tastes like anything, which is weird because it definitely looked the same. Then why was it so cold and tasteless? Why did the silence in her immediate perimeter suddenly felt alien and oppressive? Why did the distant voices and laughter of her classmates feel like daggers thrown directly at her? Swallowing, she couldn't look up. Swallowing, she looked up towards the 5 girls who had once tried to be her friends. She saw Pinky catching her gaze, trying to stand up, only to be stopped by Rainbow Dash, grabbing her, and Applejack shaking her head. The others, meanwhile, turned to look at Sunset with something akin to maybe pity, maybe concern, maybe disappointment. Whatever it was, it pressed down her chest like a weight she couldn't shrug off. She also noted how they all seemed to look at each other without hesitation before making any move, their usual warmth tempered by caution. It made her chest tighten even more. Even if they weren't afraid of her, she could feel the invisible wall rising between them. The wall was already there, you just didn't see it. A voice murmured inside her ear. Did you really think that they wouldn't turn their backs on you on the first opportunity? Pathetic. Sunset closed her eyes, trying to will the voice to go away, but the words already spoken reverberated inside her skull like cruel echoes. They made her stomach twist, her breath catch inside her throat, and her hands burn with aching fire dancing right in her skin. Let it out. The voice spoke again. What's the point of hiding? They already hate you. Those words conveying that awful possibility. They were enough for Sunset to stand up abruptly from her chair. And so for the second time that week, she ran out of the cafeteria without looking back. Sunset slammed the restroom door behind her and locked it. She knew it wasn't allowed and that she'd be in serious trouble if a professor found out, but frankly, she just didn't care. Her skin was boiling, her hands shaking, her teeth clattering. She knew these symptoms well enough by now to not be startled by her monstrous reflection that met her in the mirror. A pair of black eyes with tiny teal pupils stared back at her. Then she saw the protruding canine teeth scraping the skin of her chin. The pointed ears also weren't surprised. It was scary how familiar this sight was starting to feel. Still, although she expected it, it disgusted her. She glared at herself, snarling, despite the fact that this action made her teeth become more visible. Then a clawed hand rose up to touch the reflection, tempted to scratch it, but trembling, holding back thanks to the shred of senses Sunset still possessed. I hate you, she told the reflection, venom dripping from her voice as tears fell from her eyes. Why won't you just go away? Everyone would be happier, especially. Her voice caught in her throat, as replaced by a pained gasp, unable to voice those awful thoughts. Stop lying to yourself. You would still be a monster even if I wasn't here. The voice inside her head answered mocking. That's all you've ever been. I wasn't talking to you. Sunset yelled at her own reflection, gritting her teeth as her whole body trembled with the effort of trying to hold back her sobs. But you still wish I were gone. The voice taunted her. You fear me. I wish. Sunset's jaw clenched and her eyes looked down at her hands. Crimson, deformed, alien, and felt irrational hatred surge from her core, making her blood boil and her heart thump in her ears. I wish I never came to this land. I wish I never stole that stupid crown. I wish. The claws of her right hand descended upon her left arm, right where her skin went from gold to scarlet. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to press down, the claws digging just enough to draw pain. A flinch ran through her body, a fleeting hesitation as a sharp sting of reality pierced through the haze of anger. I wish you were dead. The words fell like a venomous whisper from her lips, carrying all the fury, despair, self-loathing that had been building inside of her. Then her claws dug deeper into her own skin, as if this action would somehow get rid of the transformation. Of course, it only brought more pain instead. Still, even as her hands trembled with hesitation, she kept going, moving onto her right arm, hoping the pain would banish the demon, but it just did nothing. Instead, she felt it mocking her, laughing at the back of her mind, relentless and cold. Her chest heaved as she started to stare down at her wounds, ugly, jagged, painful, and then the absurdity of it hit her. What the hell was she doing? Hurting herself in the school's restroom? Letting fear and shame control her? She had once been a great unicorn, Celestia's prized pupil, and now she'd regressed to this? This pathetic excuse of a girl who hurt herself just because she was rejected by the people who she thought she could call friends? How stupid. How ridiculous. How pointless. The thought burned through her, a mix of shame and pride that left her trembling as she realized what she was doing. She hated that she couldn't stop, hated that she was giving in, but just enough of her pride, her stubborn need to prove she wasn't weak, kept her from going completely over the edge. Her breathing began to ease in ragged, uneven pulls, each exchange trembling with the effort to reclaim control. The fire that had scorched beneath her skin ebbed slowly, and the claws and fangs that had felt so permanent started to recede inch by inch, as if reluctant to leave. Her black, unnatural eyes dulled, specks of teal widening until at last they reflected her own again. The sting along her arms pulsated with each heartbeat, sharp and insistent, anchoring her to the reality she almost lost. Gradually, painfully, she felt herself return, broken, battered, exhausted, but unmistakably herself. The mirror no longer taunted. It offered only a reflection of a girl who had survived her own fury. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. A shiver ran through her as she examined her arms. Her wounds weren't big, but they were numerous, and they would leave scars, ugly scars. Yet she was still here, still herself, and somehow, despite the shame and fear, she felt the tiniest spark of control return. She could handle this, she had to. She watched them, wincing at the sharp pain, but thankful to note, thanks to the rapidly diminishing flow of blood, they weren't nearly as deep as she feared, and that hopefully she would need to go to the infirmary. She wasn't sure how she would explain what happened. Still, it was probably better to go back to her place and tend to her wounds. She wasn't sure how she'd be able to keep them hidden if she stayed at school, that she didn't need anyone mocking her or worse, feeling pity for her. And so, tugging her jacket sleeves to make sure her secret would remain concealed, she exited the restroom, ensuring that the hallway remained empty as she headed to the exit with hurried steps. Sunset decided to make a little detour to her locker. She kept some of her money there, and since she wasn't sure how much it cost to buy some bandages and alcohol, she figured it'd be better safe than sorry. What she didn't expect, however, was to find an unknown paper bag inside. She was tempted not to open it. What was this? Some childish prank from her classmates? A bag with a dog shit? Except no, the smell was pretty inoffensive. Sweet, even. Cautious, she took the bag and opened it, only to find a batch of chocolate chip cookies inside. The heavenly smell confirmed it. This was Pinkie Pie's baking for sure. Trembling, she reached inside to grab one, before bringing it to her lips and taking a cautious nibble. It was real, and it was sweet, and delicious, and it warmed her insides in ways she was sure had nothing to do with the food itself. It almost felt like magic. She wiped away the tears that had suddenly spilled down her cheeks and slipped the cookie back into the bag, tucking it carefully into her backpack. "Thank you," she whispered. The words echoed in the empty hallway, swallowed by silence. For a moment, she wondered if they would somehow reach the person they were meant for, or if they would just fade like so many things she wanted to say. Taking her money, she closed the locker and walked towards the exit. Her steps were unsteady, but lighter than before. The wounds beneath her sleeves still burned, but not quite as sharply as they had. As the flavor of chocolate lingered in her mouth, she started to wonder if this simple but meaningful act of kindness was some sort of olive branch. Perhaps not everything was lost. Perhaps not all of them hated her. Perhaps Perhaps she still had a chance to make things right. All right, chapter 5, Redemption and Ruin. There's no note for this chapter. That morning, Sunset had to take a little more time than usual preparing herself to leave for school. First off, she had to put a new batch of bandages on her injuries and wash the ones she'd used the previous day, which were now stained with little droplets of blood. Then, she'd have to fit her injured arms into a long-sleeved shirt that, unfortunately for her, hugged her sensitive skin tighter than she would have preferred. Still, better than someone potentially seeing her bandages. When she was ready for school, she paused as she pulled out the last of her money, $7 measly. She didn't even remember where she got them. Perhaps she stole them from one of her classmates. Perhaps she pickpocketed them from someone in the bus. Or maybe she sneakily got them out of some homeless person's tin can. In any case, it was dirty money. It's just like all the money she'd ever gotten since she entered this world. Yet maybe it would be enough to help her. Ironic, ironic as it was that a ticket to redemption could be bought with something that came from her evil past. Just a couple of days ago, she'd been thinking about using this money to buy herself a new jacket, or perhaps something to eat if she ever found the need. Now, both of those things seemed inconsequential, as did all the other needs that might arise in the future. Perhaps it was foolish, but she didn't care. Her mind was made. And so her footsteps were resolute as she walked down the street and towards the pet store, which was on the opposite side of CHS. Therefore, there, she bought the biggest bag of cat food that she could afford, and then hastily made her way to school. She checked the clock as she arrived, confirming she'd made it 10 minutes early, just as she planned. Although, now that she was there, her palms were starting to get sweaty and her stomach was twisting painfully. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't nervous, but she pushed on. She had to. What was she so nervous about anyways? If Fluttershy and the others rejected her, she'd be back to being alone. So what? She'd been alone before she'd survived. She'd been alone before and she survived. Thrived even. She was stronger than this, and besides, if she didn't at least try to make amends, she'd be alone regardless. It'd be their loss, really. Still, as she saw the group of friends at the hallway in the distance, her feet faltered and her heart started thumping harder inside her chest. But she told herself over and over again that she wasn't scared and this wasn't a big deal. Hi. The word felt awkward as soon as it came out of her mouth, especially when 5 pairs of eyes looked at her like she was some sort of apparition. She cleared her throat, trying to find the right words to say. Her eyes flickered from Fluttershy to Pinkie to Rarity and Applejack, all with cautious and surprised expressions. Rainbow Dash, on the other hand, was looking at her with open hostility and distrust as usual. Well, here went nothing. She took a deep breath, preparing herself to speak, but Rarity beat her to it. Sunset, darling, are you all right? Her eyes were full of concern. We were worried after you ran out the cafeteria yesterday, and we didn't see you all day. Even Princess Celestia was looking for you, Pinky added, but I don't think you were playing hide and seek. Uh, um, her bravado suddenly gone, and wanting to avoid the subject of yesterday of all costs, Sunset crossed her arms over her chest and practically hugging herself for courage. I'm fine. Her voice faltered, and she quickly shifted her gaze back to her target. But Fluttershy, can I talk to you for a moment? The eluded girl startled upon hearing her name. Me? Oh. Before she could form a proper answer, Rainbow Dash went to stand between the two in a protective stance, glaring at Sunset. You can say it here, can't you? Hostility was dripping from her voice. Unless you're planning to intimidate her and make her cry again. I. Sunset was taken aback, not knowing what to say. She hadn't expected Rainbow to be quite this aggressive. Then again, it seemed like the girl had been holding back before. Dashy, please. Fluttershy put her hand on her friend's shoulder and gave her a gentle but firm look. What? You can't be serious. Do you really want to talk to her alone? The rash girl exclaimed. After what she did? Rainbow. Applejack spoke this time, voice firm but calm, casting a disapproving look at her. This is Fluttershy's decision. Fluttershy, to Rainbow's astonishment and frustration, gently pushed past her and went towards Sunset, who all of a sudden felt like a deer in headlights. Even though she was facing the gentlest, kindest person in the entire school, still she stilled her nerves, took a deep breath, and then spoke. Come, I've got something for you in my locker. With this, she turned around and was about to lead the way when Rainbow Dash spoke again. Whatever you're planning, if you touch one hair on Fluttershy's head, I'll. Sunset spun her heel, her glare colliding with Rainbow's threat mid-sentence. The words died in the girl's throat, her jaw clenching tight as her bravado wavered. A dark, familiar thrill coiled in Sunset's chest. So she still had that edge. Still knew how to make even Rainbow Dash falter with nothing more than a look. It was intoxicating. Dangerously so. What? She spat, her voice low and sharp. Beat me up? The tips of her fangs pressed against her lips, and for once she didn't try to hide them, she bared them, almost daring Rainbow to notice. I'd like to see you try. The air between them crackled, Rainbow glaring back with all the defiance she can muster. Hold on, this is not working. The air between them crackled, Rainbow glaring back with all the defiance she could muster. For a heartbeat, Sunset almost welcomed the fight, an excuse to claw back some semblance of power. Her anger writhed beneath her skin, sharp and restless, like the demon coils inside her begging to be set free. The thought of unleashing it, of letting it all burn, was intoxicating. It would be cathartic, thrilling. She could almost taste it. But then she felt it, a gentle tug at her sleeve. Her head snapped towards it, and there was Fluttershy, looking at her with not fear, but with quiet, pleading eyes. The fragile weight of the gaze pressed heavier on Sunset than any threat could. She swallowed, chest tightening. Right. She wasn't here to start fights. She was here to make amends. With effort, she tore her eyes from Rainbow and forced herself to move, tossing one last warning glance over her shoulder before marching off towards her locker. Fluttershy followed close behind, her presence still lingering like an anchor against Sunset's spiraling rage. As soon as they made it to Sunset's locker, she opened it without saying anything, took the cat food out of it, and then presented it to Fluttershy. I know it's not much. I hope it helps, she muttered, her voice rough at the edges. Fluttershy blinked, and then her eyes widened, soft and glistening. She accepted the bag and cradled it against her chest like it was something precious. Oh, Sunset. Her voice trembled, caught somewhere between surprise and relief. Thank you. Her smile was soft and sensitive as she spoke, but also genuine. Sunset tried to smile back, but it twisted halfway into a grimace. She quickly looked away, arms folding tight across her chest as if bracing herself against the warmth of Fluttershy's gratitude. Don't thank me. Her throat felt tight. It's an apology for the other day. You didn't deserve that. She swallowed, forcing her words out. I'm just tired of lashing out with my claws and teeth. I don't want to be that girl anymore. Fluttershy's gaze softened considerably at those words. The words which both acknowledged Sunset's fragility and her subsequent transformation. I'm sorry, too, she admitted. I shouldn't have cornered you like that?" The words landed heavy on clenched. Sunset's chest clenched. She turned her face aside. "Let's just forget it." Her voice was brittle. "Perhaps we can be friends, but can we at least pretend that I'm, well," she swallowed as she tentatively looked back at the girl, "normal?" Fluttershy studied her for a long, quiet moment when she finally spoke. Her voice was gentle but steady. "Sunset, I won't lie. What you did scared me." She tightened her hold on the bag. "Even now, a part of me expects you to start yelling again." The admission made Sunset flinch, her shoulders curling inward like she'd been struck. So much for the apology. "But," Fluttershy continued, drawing in a deep breath, "even if I can't forget, I think I can forgive. And I'll keep trying to be your friend if you let me." Sunset's head snapped up, eyes wide. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, like she'd lost the ability to form words. Why? The sound was barely a whisper, shaking and unbelieving. "Because I like helping," she smiled, kindness and warmth radiating from her. "And you look like you need it." Something inside Sunset recoiled violently at the words. Need. As if she was weak, broken, like one of those tiny creatures Fluttershy so enjoyed saving. She hated it, hated how true it felt. But with a tight breath, she shoved the feeling down and forced herself to answer. "I guess I could try." Her voice sounded fragile to her own ears, and she grimaced at the vulnerability of it. "Be friends, I mean." Fluttershy nodded. "The others still want to be your friends as well," she revealed, "although I didn't tell them everything." What? Sunset swallowed. That felt like a gut punch. She almost wished Fluttershy had told them. It would mean their earlier concern was despite her being a demon. But now all she could feel was a ticking clock hanging over her head, waiting for her secret to explode. "It's not my secret to share," she explained. "But when you're ready, I think they'll accept you for who you are." Her words were earnest and had a lot more conviction than Sunset thought was merited. Still, she managed a nod, lips pressed into a thin, polite line that looked nothing like a smile. The bell suddenly pierced her ears, and for once, the sound was like music for the taller girl. She sighed in relief. "We should get going," she simply said, turning her head towards her locker just to avoid eye contact. "See you at lunch?" Sunset nodded, absent-mindedly, as she rummaged through the disaster that was her locker. But then, the weight of those words sunk in, settling to her stomach like a painful weight she couldn't shake off. Lunch. She certainly wasn't looking forward to it. She kicked the door, closing it with way more force than necessary. Still, it provided little relief for the anxiety in her chest. When Sunset walked into the cafeteria that day, she wasn't less nervous than the previous one. And the reason was once again those stupid 5 friends. As such, she did her best to not look at anyone as she made her way to the food, grabbed a simple sandwich and a juice carton, and then made her way to the tables. Only then did she dare to look up, if only to get some confirmation that she was welcome there. The 4 girls, however, didn't notice her presence, too engrossed in discussing the answers to the math exam they had earlier that day. For a moment, Sunset considered just going to sit alone again, but the memory of the previous day still lingered on her mind, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth and a painful hole in her stomach. Even if she wanted to leave, her feet seemed to be stuck in place, so she simply cleared her throat to gain their attention. Instantly, 4 pairs of eyes landed on her, surprise. Soon that surprise transformed into joy. "Sunset!" Pinkie was the first to speak, jumping out of her chair and pulling the one next to her own, offering it to the newcomer. "Come sit with me," she exclaimed enthusiastically. Wordlessly, Sunset obeyed, relieved that it hadn't made a big deal out of it. "I'm glad you're able to join us today, darling." Rarity smiled at her, but her words were a painful reminder of what had happened yesterday, and Sunset shrunk in her seat at the comment. "I understand wanting to have some space for yourself every once in a while, but you are always welcome here." Sunset swallowed, but managed a nod, not wanting to dwell more on the topic. Thankfully, Applejack intervened. "Speaking of, where's Rainbow Dash? She's usually the first one here." "Oh, she's usually the first one here," she mused, speaking to no one in particular. "She said she had to go practice," Fluttershy answered, her voice unsure, "but she seemed strange." "Strange? How?" Applejack raised an eyebrow. The timid girl cast a furtive glance at Sunset, but then deviated her gaze almost immediately. It's probably nothing, she mumbled. The cowgirl pursed her lips, but decided not to press the subject for now. If you say so. Sunset, Pinkie Pie spoke this time, getting into Sunset's personal space with a wide smile on her face. Did you like the cookies yesterday? Which was your favorite? She touched Sunset's forearm just where her wounds were, and she couldn't help but flinching rather harshly. Oops, sorry, I forgot. Pinkie gave her a sheepish smile. No touching, right? Sunset nodded awkwardly, glad that she at least had a reasonable excuse for her reaction. Sorry, I'm just not used to it. It's fine, silly. She dismissed it with a wave of her hand. Now tell me it's for science. Sunset raised an eyebrow, unconvinced the girl knew anything about science, but decided to answer anyway. The one with dark chocolate and hazelnuts? It was pretty good. Pretty good was the understatement of the century. In all honesty, those cookies had allowed Sunset to keep her sanity for the entirety of the previous afternoon, and were probably the only reason she decided to even try to reconcile with Fluttershy and the rest of the girls. It gave her a spark of hope that kept her going up until that moment. Still, she'd never admit that. Not that it mattered, because it seemed Pinkie Pie had read right through her, judging by her knowing smirk. Well, in that case, I think you'll like this one. She presented a brownie to her, seemingly made of dark chocolate and hazelnuts. Sunset's eyes widened. She wondered how Pinkie had known. After all, the bag of cookies yesterday had 6 cookies of 6 different flavors. Thank you. She took the offered gift and left it to the side, not eating it yet, but also storing it for later as usual. The temptation to eat it now was definitely there. Hey, Sunset, Applejack spoke this time. I'd like to know your opinion about this problem. She handed her a piece of paper with some formulas and numbers written on it. The question from the exam they had been discussing earlier, she supposed. I said the answer is y equals x squared plus 2x minus 5, but Rarity says I'm wrong. Of course you are, darling, Rarity rolled her eyes. You didn't pay attention to the last class, did you? Your method is all wrong. But this is how Granny explained it to me, she protested. Math is math, right? Sunset wasn't sure why they were asking her of all people, but her ego didn't let her turn down an opportunity to correct other people and show her superior intellect. Although to her credit, she did try to soften her tone so it wouldn't sound extremely condescending. And so, she spent the rest of her lunch period explaining math problems to the girls until she was confident they actually understood what she was talking about. In all honesty, it felt pretty good. Okay, I thought I was going to burp or something. It actually felt pretty good to know they recognized her talents and even respected her for them. So much so that for the first time since she started hanging around them, she didn't feel painfully out of place. It was nice. It was only when the bell rang that Sunset realized she'd subconsciously eating all her lunch while she was explaining, including Pinkie's brownie. She smiled as she put away her tray, feeling the first flicker of normalcy since she could remember. Rainbow Dash ran from the other side of the field to the other, kicking the soccer ball as she did. She was sweaty, she was exhausted, and honestly, she hadn't practiced a lot more that day than was probably necessary or even healthy. She had already practiced a lot more that day than was probably necessary or even healthy. First, she'd chosen to skip lunch altogether and instead used that time to run a few laps around the field. Not because she actually needed it, or because she had some big game coming, but because she couldn't possibly sit at the table and talk to Sunset Shimmer and smile and be happy and pretend it was normal. It's not like she hated the girl. Well, not entirely, but even if she did, it wasn't unfounded. Not only had she been a bully for as long as she'd known her, but her preferred victim had been none other than Fluttershy, Rainbow's childhood friend. Despite Sunset's awful attempt at separating the group, Rainbow still talked to Fluttershy during those years from time to time, sometimes at the bus on the ride home, sometimes during class, but she distinctly remembered how many of those conversations ended up circling back to some horrible things Sunset Shimmer had done to her. Either she had stolen her money, bumped into her and made her apologize, or even taken all of her pamphlets for the shelter and broken them into pieces. And she distinctively remembered how sad and scared Fluttershy had seemed when recounting each of these instances. And sure, maybe Sunset had been defeated, and maybe she sort of apologized. Not that Rainbow believed that little act, but that didn't magically erase everything she'd done before. Not what she put Fluttershy through, and certainly not the way she made the five friends hate each other for years. No, as much as Rainbow Dash wanted to give the benefit of the doubt, she simply couldn't. And it vexed her how her friends were so ready to trust Sunset Shimmer of all people, and forgive everything she had done. The girl wasn't even trying, for fuck's sake. A particularly hard kick sent the ball flying off, and with a grunt, Rainbow ran to get it back. Like, come on. Shimmer clearly wanted nothing to do with them. She rejected their kindness at every single opportunity, and even repaid Fluttershy's concern with anger and intimidation. She could still clearly remember her friend's trembling voice when she called her that fateful afternoon. How badly she'd been crying. How scared and disturbed she sounded. Whatever had happened had been way worse than she told them. But of course she wouldn't admit it. And of course she'd protect Shimmer by keeping the truth from them. And of fucking course she'd go and forgive this stupid girl after a single half-assed apology and a simple bag of the cheapest cat food available. That was just how Fluttershy was, too kind for her own good. Rainbow had to protect her from assholes wanting to take advantage of her from more than one occasion. And this time it wouldn't be any different. She'd confront Sunset, she would. She didn't care how scary that girl could be. She didn't care that her angry eyes had looked at her with murderous intent just that morning. She wasn't scared, and she would protect her friends from their own kindness-driven naivete, or her name wasn't Rainbow Dash. She had been psyching herself up the entirety of the lunch break, as well as the 2 hours she had been training with her team after school, and the 15 minutes she'd been training alone now. It's not that she was scared. What would Sunset do? Kill her? But she couldn't deny that not all the sweat in her palms and forehead was because of the exercise. But regardless of her nervousness, she'd do it. And soon, Sunset's after-school punishment was sure to end any time soon, and she had to intercept her before she left school. Thankfully for her, she knew what kind of service to the school the girl would be doing today. Stealing her nerve, she grabbed her soccer ball and then stepped into the gym and looked around. Sure enough, at the one corner of the empty old thing was the girl she wanted to find, wringing a wet cloth on a bucket as she apparently prepared herself to finish for the day. Perfect. Taking a deep breath to give herself courage. That was loud as shit. Rainbow spoke. Shimmer. Shimmer. Her voice was firm and loud, resonating throughout the entire place. Sunset turned around with a surprised expression on her face, which promptly morphed into anger. What do you want? She snarled. I'm not in the mood for a fight. Good, neither am I. The blue girl took a step further forward, emboldened. I'm just here to tell you to stay away from my friends if you know what's good for you. An amused chuckle left Sunset's lips as a sly grin formed her face. She didn't take kindly to threats, and she definitely wasn't going to let Rainbow Dash boss her around, no matter how much her reputation had fallen lately. I think we both know, after what happened at the fall formal, that I don't know what's good for me, she answered, her tone mocking. So if that's all you have to say, I'm afraid you'll leave disappointed. She turned around, ready to leave and ignore Rainbow entirely, but the sportsy girl was having none of that. With a snarl, she tossed the ball to the ground, making it bounce with the sound of a thunderous drum in order to get Sunset's attention back. Listen to me, she shouted, suddenly consumed by adrenaline and anger. You will never be a part of us, understood? Sunset frowned as she looked back at her, but said nothing. I don't know what kind of trick you're planning, but you're not fooling me. There's no trick, she simply said. But by the way, she took a step back and clenched her hands anxiously. It was obvious that her words had an impact on her. Is it really so hard for that tiny brain of yours to understand that maybe I'm just trying to do better? She scoffed. Even that dense country girl was able to wrap her head around the concept. I'd wager you'd be at least smart enough as I'd wager you'd be at least as smart as her, but I guess I was wrong. The bitter, demeaning words came out of her mouth before she could stop herself, but the rapid thumping of her heart in her ears prevented her from fully regretting them, too lost in the heat of the confrontation. Enough with the bullshit, Shimmer, Rainbow Dash snarled, before kicking the ball and sending it flying towards Sunset. The girl flinched to prepare for the pain, but it never came. The ball hit the wall just an inch to her right and flew back at Rainbow without even touching the redhead. It would have been almost impressive if it didn't feel like such a threat. Just admit it was all an act and stay away from my friends. There's no act, Sunset yelled back, clenching her fist. Here she was, trying to be a better person and make some friends, and this was what she got in return? Distrust, hatred, anger, and suddenly her body was shaking all over. not out of fear of Rainbow's stunt, but out of rage. Can you blame her? The annoying voice inside her head spoke, full of venom. After everything you did, would you forgive yourself? Would you want to be friends with you? Don't be ridiculous. The ball flew towards Rainbow Sunset again, this time hitting it right next to her left knee and bouncing towards its owner again. Bullshit! Rainbow Dash spat, her face full of anger. Fluttershy might have forgiven you for what happened at the shelter, but you're out of your mind. You think I'm going to let you go near her or any of my friends again. This time the ball hit right next to Sunset's head. Understood? Sunset closed her eyes, trying to take a deep, even breaths, but finding it quite difficult. Her hands suddenly felt as hot as the sun, and she balled them into fists tightly, barely registering the pain when sharp claws pierced her skin effortlessly. At least the pain was keeping her grounded, but for how long? She needed to get out of here. Fast. She had almost given to these dark impulses earlier that day. She had managed to hold herself back and was rewarded with the most normal lunch hour she'd had in years. She couldn't give in now, now when things were finally starting to improve. Come on. Why hold yourself back? The voice mocked her. She already thinks you're a monster. And nothing you can do will change that, so what's the point of trying? You might as well give in and show how much of a monster you can be. I said, understood? Rainbow shouted at her again as she kicked the ball towards the spot next to Sunset's head a second time. She had to go. Now. Sunset turned to leave, using all of her willpower to prevent the demon inside of her from coming to the surface, but then, as she took the step, the ball Rainbow Dash had kicked just hit her in the head instead of the wall. There was a sharp pain in her right cheek, then a thud as her left temple collided with the cement. Finally, Sunset fell on the ground dizzy, disoriented, and pained. Oh shit. Rainbow exclaimed, her tone instantly switching from angry to worried when she realized what had happened. She took a few hesitant steps towards Sunset, trying to evaluate the damage. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. Sunset felt the blood trickling down her forehead, felt the pain and dizziness making her head spin, but most importantly, she felt the wild and uncontrollable anger when the realization of what had happened finally dawned on her. I'll be real with y'all. I've gotten hit in the head with a soccer ball many times, and I'm gonna just say I don't think that will knock you down, but I guess, I mean, this is a story. Let's just let it slide. Are you okay? Rainbow Dash leaned down, trying to see Sunset's face through her drooping hair, but all she could see was the girl on all fours, shaking, her hands the color of a bright crimson blood. Sunset? Kill her. Just kill her. It was getting more and more difficult to ignore the voice, especially with all the pain and humiliation she was feeling. Was this the thing she got for trying? For the first time ever to let people into her life and be friends? A ball to the head, a bruise, and a busted temple? What was even the point on trying to be good? No one would ever see her as anything other than a demon, a monster. Finally, she opened her eyes, seeing her hands resting on the ground in front of her, her entire arm shaking spasmodically. Most importantly, her hands were red and searing hot. The demon was out. Sunset? A hesitant hand touched Sunset's shoulder, making her look up at the culprit. Rainbow Dash backed away, then a horrified look on her face. Sunset's irises shrunk to a tiny teal dot. Her eyes turned from white to tar black, her ears elongated, and sharp canine teeth sprouted from her mouth. She was seeing red. Suddenly, Rainbow's face was the most infuriating, irritating thing she had ever seen in her life. How dare she disrespect her like this? How dare she hit her, wound her? How dare she even touch her? Sunset wanted nothing more than to grab her and rip her apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but a gory mess no one would ever be able to identify. Her face twisted into a sick grin, and that's all it took for Rainbow Dash to run. Alright, that's the end of chapter 5. So, I guess that's kind of unique, writing Sunset as a kind of murderous kind of person, but to be fair, it is the demon, I guess. Notes. This is the notes for in the chapter. Sorry for the delay. I completely forgot to upload yesterday. Also, the updates will most likely come on Monday. I think this story was made pretty recently, actually. Let me check. This story was made November 13th of 2025, which is surprising. And it was updated, just before New Year's. That's surprising. The story's not even over. So it's kind of like unexpected. I don't know. I've seen like a lot of new stories being written for Equestria Girls lately. I don't know if it's like there's been like a resurgence in popularity or something, or if it's just like a steady flow that always is kind of happening with this source material. Let me get to chapter 6. Kind of have to scroll all the way down back. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, there it is. Oh, this is chapter 8. I'm okay. Okay, chapter 6, The Edge of Control. Sunset's irises shrunk to a tiny teal dot. Her eyes turned from white to tar black. Her ears... Oh, this is repeating what happened at the end. Sunset chased her into the main school building, and across the halls, making sharp turns in corridors and trying to gain distance on her to corner the girl where she couldn't escape. Rainbow was a very fast runner. Hold on, I gotta burp. I'm not gonna lie. I low-key took a long break and I was low-key just reading this. I was hella invested. I forgot I was supposed to be like saying this shit out loud. Alright, let's go. Rainbow was a very fast runner, sure, and extremely agile too. But the stupid girl made the mistake of frantically trying to open various classrooms. No doubt in an attempt to put a physical barrier between herself and Sunset. But at that hour, the classrooms were locked and the school was empty. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Rainbow pushed open the door's bathroom, then tried to close it behind her. But Sunset caught it just in time and burst in, going after the scared girl. Rainbow backed away, looking for somewhere to hide, but the stalls would provide little protection. She'd be even more cornered inside. And the only way out was blocked by a literal demon. She was so dead. Sunset grinned in satisfaction, seeing the sweat on Rainbow's forehead, her heaving chest and darting eyes, like a cornered animal facing a predator. In a split second, am I making like mouth noises? In a split second, Sunset rushed. I'm always saying shet. I don't know. Sunset rushed forward, grabbing Rainbow by the shirt, and effortlessly pinned her to the wall, her feet dangling inches above the ground. Rainbow whimpered and grabbed Sunset's clawed hand, trying to pry it open to no avail, terror written all over her face. Sunset's smile grew even wider. She was going to enjoy destroying this stupid brat so much, piece by piece. Sunset, please, I'm sorry, the girl pleaded pathetically. I was wrong, okay? I was being a jerk. You're not a monster. Please. She whimpered again and closed her eyes as she saw Sunset's other hand raise up, ready to strike her dead with those horrifyingly sharp claws. Please. A dark, sinister laugh escaped Sunset's lips. She realized how small and terrified Rainbow looked, how much weaker and more vulnerable than the monster she herself had become, how scared she felt because of her. She was completely at Sunset's mercy, at her whim. She had the power here. The power to decide whether to kill her in one swift, satisfying blow, or to torture her, slowly driving her to insanity until the girl would beg to be dead. But she also had the power to stop. Sunset blinked, her eyes briefly turning normal, before adopting their monstrous appearance once more. She shook her head. Why stop now? This is what she wanted. To make her pay, to make them all pay for what they'd done to her. They had stolen her crown, keeping her from her destiny. They deserved the ultimate punishment. Right? Sunset! Rainbow yelled at her, not in fear or anger, but clear, powerful determination. I know you're in there. You have to stop this. This isn't you. This wasn't her? Sunset blinked once again. Who was she anyways? Wasn't she just a tool for revenge, for power, for control? No, that was in the past. She wasn't like that anymore. She couldn't be. Fight it, Sunset! Rainbow encouraged her as she saw her eyes fully turn back to normal. I know you're stronger than this thing. No, Sunset yelled. But it was like she was trying to convince herself rather than Rainbow. I will. Sunset watched in horror as her right claw, ready to strike, started to move towards Rainbow Dash. She tried to hold it back, but it's like it had a mind of its own. Why do you care? This girl hurt you. She hurt Sunset Shimmer, the most talented unicorn Canterlot has ever seen, the future ruler of Equestria. She deserves death. Death? Sunset thought bitterly. If someone here deserved death, it was her, not Rainbow Dash. The claw descended with full force, aiming at Rainbow's face. The girl flinched and closed her eyes, but the expected blow never came. Slowly, she allowed herself to look and realized that Sunset's fist, not claw, hit the wall right next to her face. The redhead let go of her shirt and took a few steps back, heaving with effort it took to stop herself. Rainbow's feet finally touched the ground, her legs shaking. The girl took a few seconds to make sure she was still in one piece and tried to calm down her frantic breathing, but she was still quite shaken up from what just happened. In fact, a part of her wanted nothing more than to bolt right out of there and as far away from this crazy demon girl as possible. But no, that wouldn't be fair. As she saw Sunset crumple to the ground, hugging her own legs and trembling, she finally realized how incredibly unfair she'd been to her. Sure, Sunset Shimmer had been the terror of Canterlot for 2 years and a half, but she hadn't really done anything besides average high school bully stunts. She was mean, sure, but she wasn't a monster. She hadn't even threatened to hurt Twilight's dog when she was trying to get the crown. The only reason Sunset had turned to a demon and tried to kill them was because she had been possessed by dark magic, something that Rainbow just realized she was still dealing with, even with the crown gone. Her stomach twisted painfully as two conflicting sides of her evaluated the options. Did Sunset deserve a second chance? Absolutely. Everyone makes mistakes, and sunsets were just exacerbated by evil magic. It didn't mean she didn't deserve forgiveness and redemption. But did it really have to be them who accepted her, who tried to understand her and incorporate her into their friend group? Even if Sunset needed someone to be there for her, surely she could find people who were willing to support her, right? Rainbow's gaze fell on this crying girl, sitting on the dirty restroom floor, sobbing and wailing like she was in excruciating pain as she hugged her legs lightly, like she was trying to hold herself together. The sight made Rainbow's heart clench despite herself. It was difficult to believe that this was the same girl that just moments ago had been a raging demon set on revenge. Heck, it was difficult to believe this had been a CHS. But hold on. Heck, it was difficult to believe that this had been a CH. Whoa, what the fuck? It was difficult to believe this had been CHS's local mean girl not even 2 weeks ago. She suddenly remembered what Fluttershy had said the previous day. That Sunset wasn't lashing out because she wanted to hurt them, but because she was like a wounded animal who didn't know how to accept help, desperate, overwhelmed, and cornered. Looking at Sunset now, shaking, broken, and lashing out only because she didn't know what else to do. Rainbow realized just how right her friend had been. Sighing, she ran a hand through her hair. She couldn't, in good conscience, just leave. Like it or not, Sunset was part of their friend group now. She was one of them. The girls would never forgive her if something happened to her. Most importantly, she would never forgive herself. Silently, Rainbow sat next to Sunset, unsure of what to say or do to help her. The poor girl looked so broken. A pang of guilt hit Rainbow as she saw the dried blood on Sunset's forehead. And at the start, she realized that she had done far more damage to Sunset than the so-called demon had done to her. She felt awful. Hey, she hesitantly placed a hand on Sunset's shoulder. It's all right. You're all right. What followed were muffled sobs and stifled whimpers, like Sunset was trying to stop herself from crying to no avail. Just let it out, Rainbow instructed as she gently squeezed her shoulder. Holding it in will just make things worse. Believe me. She chuckled awkwardly. Sunset hugged her legs tighter and buried her face deeper into her knees. Whimpering, trembling, truly a sad sight. Sunset, Rainbow sighed. She was never good at the whole feelings stuff, but she knew she had to try. This wasn't your fault, okay? None of it. She swallowed. Admitting guilt was never easy, but she knew when she had fucked up. I was wrong. I should have said all. I shouldn't have said all that to you. I shouldn't have used that damn soccer ball to intimidate you. Ugh. I shouldn't have held onto the past so tightly that I couldn't acknowledge that you were trying. She started rubbing circles on Sunset's back as the girl kept crying. All of us, we've noticed you're trying, okay? And we want to try too. We're here for you, no matter what. She paused, preparing for what she'd say next. I'm here for you. Finally, Sunset looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot and wet with tears, but most importantly, She looked terrified and helpless, just like the night of the fall formal. Rainbow flinched internally upon seeing the spot on Sunset's cheek where the ball had struck her, starting to bruise. I'm really sorry, she repeated. I really didn't want to hit you. I deserved it. Sunset's voice came out raspy and weak, through gritted teeth that she was still angry at herself. She used the back of her sleeve to wipe off her tears, snot running down her face, then closed her eyes. I deserve that and more. Sunset. Rainbow's eyes turned sad. She wasn't quite sure what to say to that. You don't. You deserve forgiveness and stop. Sunset spat out, tensing up as Rainbow's words were physically hurting her. Just stop. The other girl stared at her for a moment, trying to find the right words to say in the situation, if such words even existed. But just when she was about to open her mouth, the door to the restroom opened, and Principal Celestia came in, freezing in place as she took in the scene in front of her. I heard it. Hold on, I gotta what voice should I? I'm gonna try to do Kim Wexler, I don't know. I heard the commotion. And what happened here? The woman spoke with a worried tone as she alternated her gaze between the two girls, lingering a little longer on the wounds on Sunset's face. Rainbow had never been so simultaneously Rainbow had never been so simultaneously relieved and scared of seeing an adult in her life. Princess Celestia! Rainbow Dash jumped up on her feet. This was my fault, she confessed. I hit Sunset with the soccer ball and, She glanced briefly at the girl again, a guilty expression appearing all over her face upon looking at the girl's wounds. I'll take whatever punishment you deem fit. Just please help her. She used her best pleading face as she looked back at the principal. Of course, she knew that whatever was going on, it was far beyond her abilities as a teenage girl to deal with. Sure, she could try and be there for Sunset when she needed her, but it was far better if a proper, responsible adult took charge. Celestia sighed as she looked at Rainbow with an exasperated expression. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about your punishment on Monday. Understood. Rainbow answered with a small voice. Then she watched as the principal knelt down in front of Sunset, looking at her wounds. The girl recoiled slightly, but didn't do or even say anything. Let's go to my office, all right? Celestia asked in the gentlest tone she could muster, as if she was afraid of scaring her away. The nurse is gone, but I have a first aid kit there. Sunset looked at her with an indifferent, tired look, then nodded and let herself be helped back to her feet. She was a bit wobbly, but she managed to stabilize after a moment. The principal then put a hand on Sunset's shoulder and led her out of the restroom, with Rainbow following close behind. She'll be okay, right? Rainbow asked apprehensively. I'm kind of worried, she admitted to both Celestia and herself. Celestia halted and nodded, looking at Rainbow with a gentle smile. I'll handle this. Don't worry. You should go home before your parents start worrying about you. Right. Rainbow nodded stiffly, then looked at Sunset. She didn't want to leave yet, but she knew there was nothing she could do, and that she could trust Principal Celestia to take care of the girl. See you on Monday, right? No. See you on Monday, all right? Sunset gave her a stiff nod, and finally, Rainbow walked away, leaving the girl alone with the human version of who had once been her mentor. If not for how exhausted she was, Sunset would have been at least somewhat annoyed by this development. Come on, Sunset, you'll be fine. The gentle voice of the woman, as well as her touch on her shoulder, compelled Sunset to move forward, barely registering anything until she was sitting on a chair at Celestia's office. It felt like she was in a daze. She felt so tired. Her whole body hurt, and all she wanted to do was just stop existing entirely. She barely felt anything when Celestia rubbed a cotton ball soaked in alcohol. She barely felt anything when Celestia rubbed a cotton ball soaked in alcohol on the wound at her temple. The sting it caused being nothing in comparison to the painful transformation she'd suffered earlier. Still, part of her wanted to push her away, be a nuisance, just to spite her. Why? Just because she reminded her of her own Celestia. But she didn't do anything. She was too exhausted and really didn't care enough. I'm afraid I don't have ice, Celestia said apologetically, as she gently caressed the bruise on Sunset's face. You should try to buy something cold on your way home. Sunset simply pursed her lips and looked away. She didn't care one bit if her face were to turn completely purple the next day, and she didn't have the money to buy anything anyway. So, are you going to tell me what actually happened? The principal pried to Sunset's annoyance. You heard, Rainbow. She answered angrily. She hit me with a soccer ball. Accidentally? The woman gave her a pointed look. Sunset sighed. Yes, can I go now? Her voice sounded more irritated with every word she spoken. I'm afraid not. Celestia crossed her arms and regarded her with a stern gaze. I didn't call your parents after the formal fall. I didn't call your parents after the fall formal because you said they were out on a business trip, and because I doubted they'd believe their daughter had used magic to turn herself into a demon anyway. She paused, softening her voice. But it's obvious there's something else going on, isn't there? Rainbow hit me. Why are you interrogating me? She asked defensively. Because Sunset Shimmer, you have made up an excuse. Because Sunset Shimmer, you have made excuse after excuse to not get your parents involved in your academic life. She answered sternly, but I don't feel comfortable with sending their daughter home all battered and bruised without at least calling them to let them know what happened. Sunset pursed her lips, getting more annoyed by the second. She clenched her fists, barely registering the pain when the wounds in her palms opened again. Perhaps if she wasn't so tired of everything, she would have come up with another ridiculous excuse. But instead, she resolved to just a sigh and lean back. But instead, she resolved just a sigh and lean back on the chair, looking at the ceiling with vacant eyes. I don't have parents, she revealed, her voice neutral and uncaring. A moment of silence followed as Celestia processed her words. Then a legal guardian, she pressed, a grandparent, uncle, even older sibling. I don't have anyone, all right? She snapped, glaring at the principal. The pony who raised me is in another world, completely inaccessible for the next 2 years and a half. But even if she was here, I'd rather spend. I'd rather be said that. Okay, uh, the pony who raised me is in another world, completely inaccessible for the next 2 years and a half. But even if she was here, I'd rather be sent to Tartarus than talk to her. The pony who raised you, Celestia repeated, trying to comprehend what she was saying. I'm from the same world as Twilight Sparkle, she clarified, irritated beyond belief by the fact that she had to explain this at all. I'm surprised you didn't figure that out earlier. I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that there's a portal to another dimension in the school, Celestia admitted, with a humorous hint on her voice. I wish you had told me sooner. Like you care, Sunset answered bitterly. I do care, Sunset. She emphasized, grabbing her shoulders and trying to make the stubborn girl look at her eyes. I care about every single student here, especially if they're completely alone in this world with nowhere to stay. I have somewhere to stay. Sunset answered defensively. Technically, she did. You think no one noticed the fact that you came into school early every other morning just to use the athlete shower? She raised her hand. Or the fact that sometimes all the soap and toilet paper would disappear right out of the restrooms were supplied, only for the cameras to reveal you had taken them? Sunset glared at her. She felt called out and didn't like it at one bit. She had thought she'd been sneaky. I thought it was just a case of. Oh, this is not spelled. I thought that was just a case of a tough economical situation. Sunset continued. I thought that's what made you lash out at your classmates sometimes. She paused, her gaze softening ever so slightly. It felt pitying. I didn't know that all this time you were completely alone. If I then If I had, then maybe. She trailed off, a guilty expression on her face. Yeah, I'm alone. So what? Sunset crossed her arms over her chest, her voice angry and defensive. I've survived just fine here. Maybe so. Celestia frowned, more worried than irritated by the teenager's attitude. But I can't, in good conscience, let you go to whatever place you call home and be completely alone while in this state of mind. What state of mind? Sunset glared. This. She gestured her. You had been doing better after the fall formal. You were even making friends, she sighed, but now you look pathetic. Sunset finished for her. Lost, Celestia corrected. So, what are you going to do? Kidnap me? Sunset chuckled bitterly. To her surprise, the principal paused as if actually considering the words. You cannot be serious. Sunset's eyes widened. I really shouldn't do this. Celestia sighed, looking at the sunset with concern written all over her face. She opened her mouth and paused, staring at the girl in front of her for a very long time, as if weighing her options. Sunset shifted uncomfortably in her seat, looking off to the side as if searching for an escape route. The last thing she wanted was to end up as Celestia's charity case again, except this time the woman wasn't even a princess. I'm going to let you stay at my place, Celestia said at last. It was obvious this was a difficult decision for her, but her voice was full of conviction. Gee, lucky me. The girl rolled her eyes, trying to sound as annoyed as possible, but Celestia didn't miss the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if her body agreed that it'd be better for her to have a safe place to stay, even if Sunset wasn't ready yet to acknowledge it. Can I at least get my stuff first? Of course, she nodded. I'll inform Luna. We'll drive together to wherever you keep your belongings, and we'll head home, okay? Luna, of course. Sunset had almost forgotten about her. It seemed now she had to live in a house with not one but two overbearing and bossy adults. Terrific. Could her day get any worse? Why didn't they just send her to prison at this point? It'd probably feel less restrictive. All right, she simply muttered as Celestia grabbed her things and escorted her out of the office and towards the parking lot. She couldn't help but wishing she was in Tartarus instead. Um, here's the note. It says, "Fun fact: this was a chapter I wrote at 2 a.m. like a crazy person. Hope you liked it." That is actually very relatable. Not gonna lie. Just having an idea and writing the part you want first, which is a good idea if you're thinking about writing. You should probably just write the part that makes you excited first, and then to make yourself like motivated to write more, you basically just write what leads up to that moment, which is kind of what I do too. I kind of just have like the moment that I want to happen, and I write to it till it happens, and that's a good way to kind of have a flowing, like good pacing, good pace story. Chapter 7: New Walls, Old Wounds. We're not even halfway through this fanfic yet. Trigger warning. I don't know if I can say this. Should I just say it? Basically, everything, the average fanfiction writer, everything that they struggle with. So, you know what I mean. But it's nothing graphic, it says, but be aware. New Walls, Old Wounds. Unfortunately for Sunset, it had taken little to no convincing to get Luna to agree to her sister's crazy plan. All Celeste had to do was mention the words homeless and orphan, and suddenly the vice principal was so enthusiastic, you'd think that they were adopting a stray kitten instead of a local high school bully. It was ridiculous, absurd even, and Sunset hated the pitying glances the two kept shooting at her as they got into the car, but she said nothing. What was the point? They wouldn't even listen. So after reluctantly giving them directions to her place, they arrived to it rather quickly. It was an abandoned, two-story building not far from the school, constructed mainly with red bricks. To Sunset's credit, it at least didn't look as dilapidated as one would expect from an abandoned place, but the boarded-up windows and for sale signs hanging from the wall gave it away. "You've been staying here this whole time?" Celestia asked in disbelief upon seeing the place. "Nah, I've changed spots a couple of times," Sunset revealed, unlocking the car's door. "But I mainly stayed in this area." She kicked open the door and stepped outside, eager to retrieve her stuff and get out of there. Perhaps with a bit of luck, she'd be able to run away before the sisters knew what was going on. All her hope was immediately squandered when Luna stepped off the passenger seat and joined her side at the main door. Sunset rolled her eyes but said nothing as she walked inside the place. The older woman couldn't help but looking around as she followed her inside the dusty old house. It was obvious that no one had cleaned it in years, judging by the spider webs on every corner, the dusty floor, and the moldy walls. It smelled of dirt and humidity, and the temperature was on the cold. Okay, the temperature was on the cold side. There was no furniture at all, and Luna found herself wondering how Sunset had managed to live here. She let out a quiet sigh, but knew better than to comment. The girl then opened the door to their right, revealing the main room of this rather small construction. It also didn't have any furniture, and all the light bulbs were busted. But the most eye-catching thing was a platform made of decaying wood with stairs leading up to it. The two went up, and Luna found Sunset's makeshift bed, as well as the folded clothes to the side of it. She looked at the teenager, silently questioning her choice for bedroom. When winter comes, it's best to be as far away from the... Oh, when winter comes, It's best to be as far away from the freezing floor as possible. Sunset explained. At the mention of winter, Luna wondered how exactly the stubborn girl had managed to get by, but a quick scan revealed that what seemed to be a makeshift campfire spot. A quick scan revealed what seemed to be a makeshift campfire spot in a blackened corner downstairs. She was amazed Sunset hadn't managed to catch herself on fire. Is this all? She asked, looking at the clothes Sunset was hastily throwing inside a backpack. The girl hesitated, then led her downstairs. Under the wooden stairs, where there was a pile of books and folders full of papers and a guitar case? Two, in fact, and a small amplifier. Luna grabbed one guitar case and opened it, confirming her suspicions when she saw a familiar electric guitar inside. She cast a disapproving look at Sunset. What? She said defensively as she threw the books and folders inside her backpack. He lent these to me and hasn't asked for them yet. Luna sighed but chose not to say anything. Instead, she grabbed both guitars as well as the amplifier, and waited for Sunset to stop packing. Once that was done, they both exited the place. That's very interesting. It's like, I had like the same idea that Sunset basically plays guitar a lot to basically cope with anything. But yeah. I mean, yeah, she plays guitar in the show and stuff, but like, it's kind of interesting that people have the same kind of interpretation about her relationship with the guitar. Sunset ran her fingers on the doorframe on her way out, brushing off years of dust like she was brushing off the last bit of herself. She knew it was shitty and that she would have left sooner rather than later regardless, but this had been her safe place for nearly a year now. One of the nicest ones she's been in for sure. Maybe she wouldn't miss all the hardships that came with living here, but she would definitely miss the freedom. Forgot something? Luna asked from the sidewalk, snapping Sunset out of her thoughts. Oh no. The girl shook her head. I don't know why I'm burping so much. The girl shook her head and then went to put her stuff in the trunk of the car. It was a bit sad that all of her belongings could fit in such a small place, really. That settled. She got into the car and let herself be driven to her new home, new prison, more like, not bothering saying anything for the whole drive. She did hear the sisters talk in hushed voices about the arrangement, but she only heard something about spare room and how they need to buy some stuff soon. Truthfully, she was too drained to care, and by the time they arrived to the principal's house, all she wanted to do was lay down on the bed and sleep the weekend away. However, as soon as she stepped outside the vehicle, her jaws dropped upon seeing what could only be described as a miniature mansion. So much so that she briefly wondered if these two women were secretly royalty in this world as well. Fun fact: when I first watched the Equestria Girls movie, I didn't watch My Little Pony like the regular show. I seen the movies first, and I thought that Celeste and Luna were like fucking lesbians or something. And then like the fucking like third movie or like the last one, was it the last one? The woman they went to the camp. She was like, my sister, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, damn, what the fuck? That's her sister? That's her sister? And I was watching with someone else. She was like, yeah, they're fucking, what do you think? And I was like, I thought they were like married or like, I thought they were like, they're living together and I thought they were married and stuff. So yeah, it was a 2-story house with white walls and tall columns that decorated the paths across a beautiful garden and towards the marble steps of the entrance. The whole front face of the house, including the fine mahogany door, was decorated with golden ornaments depicting beautiful flowers and leaves. It really did remind her of Canterlot Castle. Appropriate, she supposed, but way smaller, cozier. She got a strange sense of deja vu, vaguely remembering when she'd been taken in by her mentor, after being an orphan fully living on the streets for quite some time. Except the dread she felt this time was new, she supposed. Please come in. Celestia, who was carrying the backpack with Sunset's belongings, unlocked the door and invited her to enter. Sunset did as she was told and was about to just head towards the rather inviting velvet couch to the left when she was stopped by the principal. Please take off your boots first. Sunset rolled her eyes, but she did as she was told, too tired to fight it, and then headed straight to her target, sinking into the couch with a deep sigh of relief. Truly, she hadn't sat in a couch as comfortable as this one since she was truly she hadn't sat in a couch as comfortable as this one since she lived in Equestria. And to her tired body felt even better. She closed her eyes, ready to sleep and forget this awful day, when the irritating voice of the principal interrupted her. Again. Would you like to take a shower? She asked. I'll go fetch a towel for you. Sunset glared at her, annoyed, but then actually considered her suggestion. A shower did sound nice, especially since she hadn't arrived early to school all that week, which had left her unable to clean herself as much as she would have liked. So she relented. Yeah, that sounds nice. She shrugged. Perfect. I'll go check if there's hot water then. With that, Celestia left and Luna came in a moment later, carrying the rest of Sunset's belongings. I want to do like a different voice with her. Don't mind my sister. I'm gonna do like a kind of a raspy. Don't mind my sister. I think she got carried away already. She chuckled in amusement, and Sunset simply hummed in acknowledgement, not wanting to engage in conversation. But I do suggest you pick a fresh set of clothes before she goes and buys you some yourself. No, that was too late. I was doing like kind of a nerd ass voice. But I suggest you pick a fresh set of clothes before she goes and buys you some herself. That's good enough. Horrified by that possibility, Sunset reluctantly got out of the cushiony heaven she was in and started rummaging through her backpack before picking a fresh pair of panties, an old pair of sweatpants, and an equally old gray sweater, an oversized shirt with the band logo, which effectively functioned as her PJs. She saw Luna raise an eyebrow. How many of how many of your belongings are actually flashes? The vice principal asked, a hand on her hips. None, Sunset deadpanned. They're mine now. The hint of a smile tugged at Luna's lips, but she suppressed it. The bathroom's at the end of the hallway, she said, pointing straight ahead. What the fuck? I can't fucking read. And the spare room, which is where you'll be staying, is upstairs to the left. The door that doesn't have a sun symbol on the door. Thanks, she said with no sign of true gratitude in her voice. I'll take your belongings there. Luna didn't seem to be bothered by her attitude. I suggest you unpack after your shower. And with that, still carrying Sunset's guitars, she went up the white marble stairs, which were decorated with a red carpet that definitely was way too much for a simple house, but appropriate for Celestia's residence, she supposed. Sunset was now alone in her principal's living room. Finally, she took the time to look around. It was rather spacious, with a set of two of these luxurious couches, a coffee table made of dark wood, plants framing the tall window that gave a clear view of the garden, and a flat-screen TV that almost occupied the entirety of the wall the biggest couch was facing. With the start, Sunset realized that there was also several video game consoles under the TV, neatly organized in a small wooden stand. For a moment, Sunset thought about how foolish the sisters were. She could easily rob the place and run away. She was sure there were even more valuables around than just video game consoles, perhaps silver spoons in the kitchen. Or what about that painting that hung in the hallway? It looked expensive. With the money she'd make selling all this, maybe she could start a new life, away from here. Still, Sunset simply hugged her PJs tighter to her chest and walked down the hallway to see where the bathroom was. What was the point of running anyway? Everything was the same wherever she went. She had to run off to an entirely different world and still ended up in the exact same situation she'd been in a couple. Bro, that's a long ass sentence. She had to run off to an entirely. Okay, let me just stretch my mouth. She had run off to an entirely different world and still ended up in the exact same situation she'd been in Equestria, for fuck's sake. Just then, Celestia walked out of the bathroom and smiled warmly at Sunset. I left a fresh towel for you next to the sink, she informed. The water is already hot, I checked. Thanks. Sunset answered dryly again and walked past Celestia towards the bathroom, just wanted to get this over with and go to bed. Don't hesitate if you need anything, she called as Sunset slammed the ornate... Oh, fuck. She called as Sunset slammed the rather ornate door. The bathroom was spacious and completely decorated with white tiles with a golden trim. The tile on the floor, by contrast... She rolled her eyes but left her PJs hanging on the hook by the door, then swiftly took off her clothes and bandages, tossed them to the corner without a care, and headed straight to the rather big bathtub at the end of the room. Closing the sliding opaque crystal door behind her, she debated whether she should take a shower or a bath. Usually she preferred showers, but it had been ages since she took a bath, and relaxing in the hot water truly sounded amazing after the awful day she had. And so, after waiting for an uncomfortable amount of time for the bathtub to fill up, and tossing one of the many bath bombs inside, She finally got to relax in the water as she had wished. She let out a sigh, letting her muscles relax under the warmth, as she gently started scrubbing away the grime from her hair and then her body. She hated to admit it, but living in a proper house seemed to have more advantages than disadvantages already. Still, her mood soured when she was about to scrub her forearms. The ugly wounds she inflicted upon herself the previous day were stinging thanks to the same warmth that soothed the rest of her body, mocking her. She gently traced them with her index finger, noting how red and inflamed the surrounding tissue was. She sighed. How foolish. How pathetic she'd been to do something like that to herself. Then again, it was to be expected, wasn't it? If she wasn't a pathetic fool, she wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. She'd be at Celestia's space, the palace, the true Celestia. She'd been crowned a princess in Alicorn, ready to roll by her side. The thought tasted bitter in her mouth, and she sank deeper to the bathtub, as if the hot waters could erase the imagined scene that would never come true. Only a moment later did she realize that her nose was now underwater. Then again, did it matter? If she drowned right now, what difference would it make compared to living another day? What was even the point? Her dream had fallen out of her grasp years ago, long before she even realized, and now she was stuck in a foreign world that seemed to be mocking her and punishing her at every turn. She turned her head, acutely aware that her lungs were burning, and she wouldn't be able to hold her breath for much longer. All she had to do was let the water in, then it'd be all over. Sunset, a knock on the door, and Celestia's distinct voice cut through her thoughts, startling her. She inhaled involuntarily, and then lifted her head off the water, coughing out of shock. Sunset, are you okay? Coughing some more, Sunset finally managed to get the water out of her respiratory tract, even though the heat and the soap it contained left her nostrils and throat burning. Sunset, Celestia prompted again. I'm fine, she choked out, voice raspy. There was a pause as if the adult was thoroughly unconvinced, but at the end decided against pressing the issue. I'm going to prepare dinner. Anything you want to eat? At the question, Sunset paused. It had been months since she had last had a proper dinner, probably since her last date with Flash, and the thought of a hot meal definitely made her mouth water and her stomach churn, even if she didn't want it to. Whatever you have is fine, she ended up saying, but after a moment her mouth spoke again, betraying her. But pizza would be nice. Pizza? It was obvious the principal hadn't expected or hoped for such an answer, which gave Sunset a small satisfaction. Sure, any preferences? Sunset thought for a moment. Honestly, any pizza was better than the cold cafeteria pizza that only had a canned tomato sauce and cheap cheese, but as she remembered the many nights she spent playing video games with her ex-boyfriend and his friends, a distinct flavor came to her mind. Pepperoni, she ended up saying. Be real, y'all. Pepperoni's mid as shit. Shit salty as fuck. Hawaiian pieces fucking, that's the shit right there. Right. Celestia didn't seem comfortable with Sunset's choice for dinner, but if she had any objections, she'd keep them to herself. I'll order now, and it's usually here within 30 minutes, so you should hurry. With that, determined footsteps were heard as she walked away from the bathroom door, and finally Sunset decided it was time to finish up and dry herself. As much as she liked the warm water and its relaxing effects, being alone with her thoughts for even a second longer than necessary didn't sound as appealing as a slice of freshly baked pizza. Sunset arrived at the dining room, which was next to the living room, and was surprised to see it was empty, although she could hear Celestia somewhere nearby. Curious, she followed the noise towards a simple wooden door at the corner and peeked her head inside, surprised to see a normal kitchen and a small white counter where the pizza box was placed. She didn't recognize the brand, but the smell was pleasant enough that she ended up stepping inside without even meaning to. Oh, Sunset, you're ready. You're here already. The principal smiled, turning to look at her as she stopped what she was doing, searching for something inside the pantry. Please take a seat. She pointed to one of the two chairs at the counter, and Sunset reluctantly obliged. Wasn't Luna going to die with them? As if reading her thoughts, As if reading her thoughts, Celestia kept talking as she put a fine porcelain plate in front of the girl. Luna went out, she sighed. She won't be back until morning. I don't know where she gets all the energy to stay up all night. Sunset couldn't help chuckling at Celestia's comment. If what she read about this princess, oh fucking hell! What she read about Celestia's fuck, dude. If what she read about Princess Celestia's sister back in Equestria was true, then her human counterpart's action made a lot of sense. What? Celestia tilted her head in confusion, but Sunset just shook her head. Nothing. I mean, nothing, she said, opening the box and reaching for a slice of pizza. It was pepperoni, like what she asked for, but it had a thick layer of cheese, much thicker than what she was used to. And when she took a bite, it took her plate and the aroma filled her nostrils. She took it to her plate and the aroma filled her nostrils. She also noticed that the sauce likely had a rich blend of herbs and spices in it that gave it an expensive feel, unlike the cheap fast food she was so used to. As such, the first bite she took didn't disappoint, and she couldn't stop the happy noise that escaped from her at the taste. Seems like I made a good choice. Celestia smiled, taking a slice for herself and putting it on her plate, before she started cutting it up with a fork and a knife. Sunset rolled her eyes again. I usually don't eat pizza, but this is my favorite place to order when I do. Sunset simply nodded, too tired to make conversation, and enjoying her pizza too much to stop for even a second. Soon she was taking another slice, and before Celestia even ate half of her own. Someone's hungry. The adult noticed, amused, and then passed Sunset a steaming cup of water. Do you prefer coffee or tea? Coffee's fine. Finally, Sunset paused her ravenous eating to prepare her coffee with the ingredients. Okay, Sunset, coffee is fine. Coffee's fine. Oh, fucking shit. You know what? I'm gonna take a break just to say something. Being fucking coffee, that's real as shit. Coffee at night, she's me for real. Can't fucking, like, I was surprised when I read that. That's like fucking me as shit. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sunset is fucking me as fuck. I'm not gonna fucking lie to y'all. Uh, Sunset paused her ravenous eating to prepare her coffee with the ingredients handed to her, and Celestia took this opportunity to talk some more as she waited for her tea to be ready. I must admit, I was surprised you didn't ask for the vegetarian option, she mused. After all, it used to be a pony, right? The girl paused half by, briefly recalling how shocked she'd that that humans ate meat back when she first arrived to this world. It had disgusted her deeply that she only found out after she had already eaten it and liked it. It had felt wrong, unnatural. Now it was ordinary, which unnerved her as she thought about it for too long. Sunset took a sip from her coffee a little too quickly, not caring by the way it scalded her tongue. I've been a human for nearly 3 years now. I got used to it. Celestia nodded and laughed softly, mostly to herself. Sunset raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything as she instead took another slice of pizza for herself. Sorry, I find it strange that there's a whole world of sentient ponies out there, the principal commented, seeing Sunset's questioning look. Believe me, it's even weirder than you think, she remarked between bites. I can imagine, she nodded, then paused, deep in thought as she kept eating. When she swallowed and took a tentative sip of her tea, she decided to change the subject. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a black rectangular object, and slid it across the counter towards Sunset. Finally, the girl paused her ravenous eating to look at it. Her right eyebrow rising in response as she looked. Fuck. Hold on. Finally, she paused her ravenous eating to look at it. Her right eyebrow rising in response as she looked at the adult. It's like 12 a.m. right now. I mean, like, I've been fucking going to sleep at like 4 a.m. every day, but it's still kind of hard. It's hard out here. It's a gift. It's a gift, Sunset clarified. Luna's old phone. I figured it would come in handy. Sunset eyed the thing but didn't take it. Personally, she had never seen the point of having a device people could easily use to contact you at all times. It just seemed like an invasion of privacy, really. She knew it could do other things like take pictures, play music or videos, or even access the web, but she didn't even see the point. She didn't see the point when cameras, TVs, and computers were more practical. Please take it. It'll make you feel better, the adult asked gently, pushing it more towards Sunset. You can use it to contact me or Luna in case of an emergency. Her tone left no doubts that this wasn't up for discussion. Not wanting to fight, Sunset took the device reluctantly. Secretly, however, she decided to keep it turned off at all times. She really didn't fancy getting random calls or messages during the day. Celestia smiled at her compliance. You can also use it to contact your friends, and I'm sure they would appreciate it. Her noises cut through Sunset like knives, and even the pizza couldn't soften the blow she felt. She fixed the principal with a glare. Um, I don't have any friends. I'm sorry. Her apology sounded more like a confused question. I just thought that. Yeah, you thought wrong. She answered bitterly. Those girls weren't her friends. They had just taken her as a charity case, and she was playing along because it was easier than resisting. That's all. All right. She sighed, dropping the topic from now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I was just trying to help. Celeste gave her the most earnest look she could muster, but Sunset wasn't buying it. She knew gestures like this never came without strings attached. Why? She asked plainly, stuffing yet another slice of peas into her mouth. The principal startled at the question. What do you mean, why? She frowned. Why are you helping me? She clarified. I don't mean just the phone, but everything you're doing. She scoffed, shifting into a rather cynical tone. I don't buy this whole goody two shoes bullshit. Celestia sighed, disappointed by the answer, but recognized that Celestia had been on her own for who knows how long. It was only natural that she be skeptical in the face of genuine help. Because I see great potential in you. She ended up stating the most logical, no feelings reason she could come up with. Of course you do. Sunset smiled bitterly and shook her head. I know what great potential looks like, and I'm not it. She grimaced at the stab on her chest that she felt her own words. Says the top student at CHS. The principal reminded her with a tiny smile. I think you mean demon, she deadpanned. Not everything is black and white, Celestia answered without missing a beat. So that's it? Sunset raised her voice subconsciously. You don't want to lose your top student, so you take me in, she scoffed. Is it really that important for you? There was a tense pause as Sunset looked at Celestia with narrowed eyes. Or perhaps you just want me to be in your debt, in case I ever do something great with my life, and you get a chance to cash in on favors? Silence rang between them as Celestia's expression became sorrowful, and Sunset took it as a small victory. She'd called her out, cornered her, and now she was too ashamed to speak. How easy that was. This Celestia had nothing on her pony counterpart. However, the principal remained calm and composed even on the face of such accusations. She simply took a deep breath and then looked at Sunset in a compassionate way that made her shift uncomfortably in her seat. I don't expect anything from you, she answered sincerely. I don't even expect you to believe me right now and I understand if you distrust me. Sunset pursed her lips but hid her discomfort by sipping from her coffee. But that doesn't change the fact that I want to help you and I'll do everything in my power to see you get better, however long that takes. Yeah, well, for once the rebellious teen was at a loss for words. Although Celestia seemed sincere, a part of her wanted nothing more than to believe her. She knew she couldn't. She knew it would be foolish, especially considering how deeply similar she was to her pony counterpart. Celestia studied her for a moment. Her expression softened even further. Have you really never had someone who supported you unconditionally? She asked, a sad look on her face, upon noticing Sunset's reluctance in the face of kindness. Not even the pony who raced you? This time, Sunset felt a pang of pain in her chest, as old memories resurged. Memories of warm hugs, only given when perfect grades were accomplished. Memories of expensive gifts and sweet treats, presented to her only when achieving great magical feats. Bars. Memories of getting scolded. Memories of getting scolded when she came short of expectations, and only getting praised when she exceeded them. Memories of constantly seeking validation, only to always be told that it wasn't enough, that she had to be better. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the painful reminder. No, she was a bitch. The words came out sharp, but the ache behind them lingered, although she knew deep down that she was being unfair. Not that she cared. Princess Celestia had been unfair to her as well, so she supposed they were even. I'm sorry to hear that. Celestia reached out gently and tried to touch Sunset's hand, only for the teenager to recoil hastily. I'll promise I'll do better. I doubt it. The words came out of her mouth before she could stop them. She knew she was lashing out at the wrong Celestia, that this one hadn't done anything wrong yet, but she couldn't help it. The two were too much alike. Still, she felt a little ashamed when she saw the hurt look on her face. So, shit, I hope y'all didn't hear that. So as the coward she was, she downed her cup and excused herself. I'll go to bed. I'm exhausted. Sure. Her voice came softer than before, and Sunset would have felt worse if she had actually had the capacity to care. She was about to exit the kitchen when Celestia's voice stopped her again, as the adult stood up. Wait. Suddenly, losing the hurt tone in favor of focused pragmatism, she went to the fridge, took a bag out of it, and gave it to Sunset. It felt cold to the touch. More than cold, it was freezing. And it had small cubic things inside. Ice? It's for your bruise, she clarified, gesturing at Sunset's cheek. In all honesty, the girl had already forgotten about it. She nodded stiffly. Thanks. And with that, she bolted upstairs and towards her new room, uncomfortable about the way she'd been uncomfortable at the way she had been reprimanded by her behavior, instead of received uncomfortable at the way she hadn't been reprimanded by her behavior, and instead received more kindness in return. It felt wrong. It felt deceiving, like she was slowly being lured into some kind of trap. The problem was that, for the life of her, she couldn't figure out what the trap could possibly be. But she also couldn't let herself believe, not even for a moment, that such trap only existed in her mind. Alright, this is chapter 8. We're almost halfway, and I might stop when we're in the halfway point. Chapter 8. Ahem. The moonlight's the way. What are you doing here? Celestia's voice startled Sunset out of her immersion on the book she was reading. A book about a certain magical mirror. She stood up and turned to look at her mentor, the tall, imposing Alicorn, casting a long shadow under the warm light of the fireplace. To most ponies, her presence would have been comforting and awe-inducing, but for Sunset in that moment it felt quite menacing, especially since she was standing directly in front of the only exit, looking at her with a cold, disapproving eyes. However, the young mare swallowed her fear and marched towards her, stomping her hooves harder than she needed to. I have every right to be here. You've denied me answers for so long. The alicorn's eyes narrowed even further. You're not ready, she spoke, voice firm and unrelenting. This magic is dangerous, and I won't allow you to put it on yourself or others at risk. But the stuff you're teaching me is barely a challenge anymore, she complained, feeling a familiar, unpleasant pressure in her chest. I'm ready for more. I can prove it to you. I'm ready to be an alicorn. An alicorn? Celestia's eyes widened. I saw it in the mirror, Sunset said, her voice trembling, not with just excitement, but with something more frantic, almost feverish. Me, as a princess, ruling Equestria. Her eyes glimmered with a strange light, as though still caught in the vision. It didn't just show me my future, it called to me, like it knew who I was meant to be. She stepped closer, her tone sharpening. I'm ready to take my destiny. I have to. A plea crept in her voice, insistent. I'll do anything. Whatever magical feat you want me to perform, I'll do it. Just say the word. Celestia closed her eyes, taking deep breaths, as if trying to calm herself down. When she looked at Sunset again, her expression was sad and conflicted. Sunset, I know how deeply you feel about this, but the path you're on isn't the one I want for you. You are more than your ambition. The young mare let out a groan and glared at the princess. She heard those words so many times before they felt hollow now. Am I? She questioned, cynical. Without my ambition, I wouldn't be your pupil. I'd be just a pathetic little orphan like so many in Equestria. Celestia's eyebrows furrowed. Maybe if you spent less time thinking of other ponies as pathetic, and more time trying to make friends, I wouldn't have to hold you back. Friends, right. It always circled back to this, didn't it? The princess of loneliness, unwilling to get close to her so-called prized pupil, but preaching friendship like it was the greatest thing to ever exist. It didn't matter that Sunset had tried to make friends multiple times, only to quickly learn that those who were willing to humor her only cared about getting close to Celestia, or about having someone to do their homework for them. The princess just wouldn't listen to her. She never did. But if friendship meant letting herself be used by mediocre ponies to further their goals, then Sunset was better off alone. She gritted her teeth, feeling her anger rise from her chest like a heat wave, uncontrollable, overturning her reason. Perhaps if you spent less time preaching about friendship and more time actually making friends, I'd believe you when you say something I need to bother myself with. Perhaps if you spent less time preaching about friendship and more time actually making friends, I'd believe you when you say it's something I need to take time bothering myself with. She had sounded like a petulant child, but she didn't care. Sunset. The princess' voice was less conflicted now, more hurt and angry. She took a deep breath and her feathers rustled. I forbid you to study the mirror ever again. Great. The young unicorn's voice was dripping with sarcasm. Sure, let's deflect again, shall we? Just tell me just like how you've been deflecting all my questions about the mirror, even though you are the one who showed it to me in the first place. Listen to me. I have reason to believe its magic has corrupted you, she insisted, but Sunset saw right through her lie. Do you? Or are you just too afraid of what it showed to me? She grinned with malice, feeling like she cornered Celestia for once. After all, if I am to rule Equestria, where does that leave you? A mocking laugh escaped Sunset's lips, but it sounded more sinister than she intended. Still, the scared look on her mentor's face was enough reward. Little things could scare an immortal alicorn, but if Sunset managed to do it, it could only mean she was on the right path. Celestia swallowed, her lips trembled slightly. She briefly looked down at the ground, her hooves shifting uncomfortably, hesitating. The silence stretched for an uncomfortable amount of time that felt as fragile as glass. Part of Sunset wanted to break it, but another part was afraid of what happened if she did. When the princess looked back at Sunset's eyes, there was something wrong with her expression, something more vulnerable than anything the unicorn had ever seen before. Yet when she spoke, her tone was calm, deliberate, and final. You must leave Canterlot at once. What? The unicorn's incredulous voice pierced through the deafening silence. Her heart pounded in her ears, flattened as she imagined guards barring her away, the palace doors closing forever. She had never, not in a million years, imagined this to be the outcome of her rebellious defiance. You can't be serious. A nervous hoof stomped the ground, and the echoes resonated through the silence of the library, mirroring Sunset's own spiraling thoughts. Canterlot was her home, where she met the princess, where she grew up and studied. It was all she ever knew, all she ever had. More importantly, it was where Celestia was, where her destiny laid. Who was she, if not the princess's prized pupil? What was her destiny, if not to rule by her side? I am serious, Sunset. The princess spoke gravely. You must leave the mirror's influence before it's too late. What are you talking about? Sunset yelled. The mirror showed me my destiny. But you wouldn't even tell me what it was. Her voice was rising, trembling. Her breath becoming labored. Her stinging eyes were a dead giveaway that she was rapidly losing composure, but she couldn't stop herself. You spent all this time dismissing my questions, and are you just gonna cast me away because I tried to seek answers? She scoffed. I thought you were supposed to be my mentor. Sunset shimmer. The alicorn's wings opened wide as she spoke, making her seem bigger than she already was. Sunset recoiled instinctively, despite herself. If you don't leave now, I'll be forced to send you away by any means necessary. Sunset gritted her teeth, feeling indescribable pain coursing through her whole body. Was she serious? She seemed serious. Was she really about to exile her just because she snuck into the restricted section of the library? Wasn't that a little excessive? She briefly considered asking for forgiveness, showing repentance, and seeking guidance. She knew Celestia was compassionate enough for that to work, but no, the princess had held her back long enough. She wouldn't give in to this blatant attempt at intimidation. She wouldn't fall for her bluff. When Sunset's gaze remained defiant, and the silence stretched too long, Celestia's eyes saddened and a sigh escaped her lips. Very well. She folded back her wings, and for a split second, Sunset thought she'd won. That if it had been a bluff after all, and the princess would not go back under the harsh words. And the princess would not go back under harsh words. But then Celestia called the guards. Instantly, 2 white unicorns donning familiar sets of armor came burrowing to the library. Escort her out of the palace. Don't let her back until further notice. She spoke to them, not a hint of hesitation in her voice. Let her stop by her room together, whatever she needs. But don't let her leave your sight. No, this couldn't be happening. Was she really being exiled? Was she really losing her position as Celestia's pupil? Was she really going to be denied her destiny with such finality? Why did the princess see her ambition for knowledge as such a threat? Bitterness and anger surged through every fiber of her being, rising like a shield to smother the shock, the fear, the heartbreak. But they were still there, lingering beneath the surface, twisting in her chest like a knife. Her hooves trembled as she was flanked by the guards, and for a fleeting moment she actually considered turning back, apologizing, pleading, anything to undo what just happened. Her pride screamed in protest, but something quieter, something wounded, whispered that she had gone too far. But the whisper was fragile, and pride was loud. She stilled herself, swallowing down every tremor, every doubt, and blinking away the tears in her eyes. She would not give Celestia the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her head lifted high as she walked past the princess, though her legs felt like stone. She met Celestia's eyes, glare burning with as much malice as she could summon. Though deep down, she wasn't sure if she hated her, or just couldn't bear the thought that Celestia no longer believed in her. "This is the biggest mistake you'll ever make, princess," she spat, her voice colder than she felt. And just like that, she made a promise, half out of fury, half out of desperation. She would achieve her destiny by any means necessary. She would prove Celestia wrong, prove that she had been worthy, that she was destined for more. Because if she didn't, then what was she? Sunset shot up, Sunset shot up on her bed, or well, the bed in Celestia's guest room. Her chest was heaving, her heart racing, and her thoughts and feelings were in total disarray, as it always happened whenever she had this particular nightmare. The memory about the night she'd been exiled from her home and, unable to accept it, she had exiled herself from the reality entirely. Thankfully, it had been a while since the last time, but the reason as to why it was resurfacing now was unfortunately pretty obvious. The guest room was staying at now. The guest room she was staying at now reminded her a lot of the old bedroom back in Canterlot. Spacious, comfortable, cozy, with the sweet aroma of fruits and flowers. Back then it had been comforting. Now it was suffocating. This room was smaller, yes, and definitely not as luxurious. But the similarities were staggering. Not to mention that she was now in the exact same situation as she had been when Princess Celestia had taken her in. Vulnerable, broken, depending on her for everything. She hated it. She had gone through so much only to end up where she started. And what had she gained in the process? Nothing but pain and ugly scars. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't repeat history once more. She didn't want to go through that again. Maybe that really meant to help her. Maybe they really meant to help her. Maybe they could have been different, but no. It was too late. It was always too late. Throwing off her blanket, she quickly got dressed and then stuffed her PJs in the backpack that contained the rest of her clothes. Unfortunately, her books and guitars would have to stay, but she took a folder that contained her forged legal documents and put it in as well. She cautiously exited the room. Loki, leading guitar, like, bruh, might as well just ended it at that point. Like, bro, what the fuck? Like, no enjoyment in your fucking life, just fucking backpack. No guitar. Letting out a breath, she didn't know what she was holding. She carefully went down the stairs, thankful that the carpet was helping muffle her steps. Then she headed straight towards the main door, practically savoring freedom already. But just when her hand grabs the handle, a voice interrupted her. "Going somewhere?" She turned towards the couch, startled, and saw Luna sitting there by herself. The moonlight entering through the window cast a faint glow over the living room, just enough to catch the steam rising from Luna's mug, and the subtle weight of her gaze. Not accusing, just surprised, just waiting. I just, Sunset mumbled, unable to come up with a convincing excuse. Not gonna lie, I'm so congested. Maybe some tea or something. Sunset mumbled, unable to come with a convincing excuse. She had wanted to leave like a ghost. No confrontation, no resistance, never to be seen again. She hadn't planned on what she'd do if she was confronted by Luna in such a manner, nor had she prepared herself for the shame she felt upon being caught red-handed. Luna calmly downed her cup, put it on the coffee table, and then got up from the couch. She walked towards Sunset, and the girl braced herself to be reprimanded, frantically trying to come up with arguments in her mind. But Luna simply pried the backpack from Sunset's hands and calmly put it down on the floor. "If you can't sleep, I'd appreciate the company," she smiled at her. "Let's go for a walk." Without waiting for her response, Luna turned around and put on her shoes. Then as she was unlocking the door, Sunset subtly glanced at the clock on the living room. The numbers read 3:34. Was she really serious about going for a walk at this hour? "You coming?" Luna called from the entrance, holding the door open for her. The girl found her feet obeying despite her mind not having made a decision yet, perhaps because it was easier than starting an argument. And so after crossing the garden, the two strolled down the sidewalk side by side. The night was silent, save from the chirping of crickets and the occasional crunching of dry leaves under their feet. Luna didn't try to initiate a conversation either, and Sunset was thankful for that. She had to admit to herself that this was somewhat relaxing. The oppressive feel of the luxurious house she was being forced to stay at had suddenly been carried away by the cold autumn wind. Probably need to read slower. She looked around and saw the big fancy houses that adorned the entire neighborhood. Although they all seemed tacky to Sunset, she had to admit they had a strange appeal to them, a certain air of an old wealthy neighborhood. If she had to guess with her limited understanding of human architecture, the place was probably at least 200 years old. Old money, I see. Ugh. That plantation money, I see. Ugh. I was about to like fuck around and like pretend like the book actually says something about slavery. I was about to be late. Perhaps Luna's grandparents were slave owners. I'm about to say some shit like that, but I'm not gonna joke like that. The trees on the sidewalk were tall, with branches growing wild in all directions, and providing shade all over the street. The gardens were well kept, but not too neat. Some of the stone fences were entirely covered by either ivy or wisteria, giving them almost a fairy tale like look. All in all, this place was nothing like Canterlot, but it had its own charm. Less extravagant, smaller, subtler. I hate the word subtle. It's like I keep wanting to say the subtler, but I know it's subtler. They crossed the street and entered a park. The trees were so tall and packed so tightly together that after just a few steps, it was easier to forget that they were in a city at all. The chanting of owls right above their heads definitely helped convey the feel that they were suddenly in the forest. And the smell, Sunset breathed in deeply, pine needles, humidity, dirt. It was all soothing. They came to a stop in front of a small lake, which reflected the moon's light I'm actually tripping right now. They came to a stop in front of the small lake, which reflected the moon's light in its calm waters. Luna sat down on a bench facing it, and then pat the spot next to her, inviting, but not demanding. Sunset sat down, but kept staring at the scenery in front of her, instead of the person she was with. Beautiful, isn't it? Luna spoke for the first time since she left the house. Her voice was quiet, but the sound of it felt like an intrusion upon the peaceful setting regardless. Still, Sunset forced herself to answer. It's calming. She settled for. Luna simply nodded. When I can't sleep, I often come here at night, she revealed. It's become a habit over the years. Sunset hummed in acknowledgement, but didn't say more. Yet the implication still lingered in her brain. Luna often couldn't sleep? Why? She clearly came from a privileged background, and her relationship with her sister was good. She even had a good job that she seemed to enjoy. Was it just mundane worries? Work-related stress? Plausible, but Sunset didn't think that was the case. Nah, she got good relationship with her, good relationship with your parents. Nah, you can fucking sleep. That's the fuck she's thinking right now. Nah, good relationship with your mom, good relationship with your dad. You can fucking sleep, nigga. Like, oh shit. Damn, I have to fucking cut that shit out. I don't know. She recalled legends from her own land about the two celestial sisters, and how one of them had been imprisoned on the moon by the other when she was deemed too dangerous. Obviously, Luna wasn't in the moon, and she got along with Celestia well enough now. But had it always been like this? Unable to suppress her natural curiosity, she found herself asking, "Do you?" Sunset's voice was raspy, so she cleared her throat. Do you often have nightmares or? Sometimes, she admitted. Although over the years, my insomnia has become a matter of habit. I prefer to be awake at night and sleep during the day, whenever I can. Sunset nodded, slightly disappointed by the answer. Still, Luna continued talking unprompted. At first, it was a way to avoid my sister and a spider, all at once. She chuckled, a small smile appearing on her face. Sunset's eyes widened, so the sisters had fought once upon a time. It seems history really tended to repeat itself across dimensions. You see, when our parents... Oh shit, the parents are dead. Okay, my joke earlier does not apply. You see, when our parents died, Celestia took it upon herself to take care of me. The woman continued speaking, her tone calm and neutral with no emotions portrayed. She was legally an adult already, and I was just a teenager. So she felt like I was her responsibility. She shook her head in amusement. You've seen her in action. She can be overtly maternal. And back then, she was the same. Sunset nodded. It wasn't hard to imagine, although she supposed it would have been difficult or even impossible for Luna to see her as a parental figure if their age gap wasn't all that big. I resented her, of course. I rejected all her care, and I challenged all her rules, defied her boundaries. A sigh escaped her lips, as if she was disappointed with her old self. She could never replace Mom. She could never fill that void in my heart, so I left. Because rejecting her was easier. Sunset winced, feeling a pang of pain in her heart. Not because of Luna herself, but how her story mirrored her own. Celestia could never replace Mom for Luna, just like as she could never replace the mentor Sunset had lost, the one who had lost her, so she ran. She felt called out, exposed, like a book without a cover, not even having to be open to be read. But I came back years later, she continued. Celestia received me with open arms and didn't scold me even once. A hint of sadness finally crept up in her eyes. She was just happy to have me in her life again, and she closed her eyes as if reliving the memory. I was relieved to know that she didn't hate me. There was a pause as Luna opened her eyes again, and for the first time since the start of her conversation, chose to look at Sunset's eyes instead of the scenery that surrounded them. The girl felt small under that unreadable gaze, but she also felt strangely comforted. She knew whatever she said next would be of great importance. I could have spared myself years of suffering, of struggling, of uncertainty, if I had just opened my heart for love sooner. Her smile was gentle as she spoke, yet still bittersweet with regret. If I had just allowed myself to realize that reliance isn't weakness, that isolation isn't strength, and that independence is overrated. She chuckled. Perhaps Celestia and I would have had to navigate through our pain, wouldn't have had to navigate through our pain alone. Sunset looked away. She understood what Luna was saying, really, but she understood how it pertained to her own situation, but it was different anyways, wasn't it? Celestia was Luna's sister. Even if she wasn't a parental figure, there was an unspoken bond there, an obligation to be there for her, to help her, to stay by her side no matter what. Sunset was just a stray kitten, alone, scared, wounded, and most importantly, easily discarded. Hold on, chat. Okay, I'm good. She wasn't their responsibility. She wasn't their problem. She wasn't their burden to carry. They could cast her out as soon as things became difficult, as soon as she stepped out of too many lines or pushed back too many boundaries. No one would hold them accountable. No one would even condemn them, not even Sunset. She had come to this world as an orphan. Every relationship she ever had, conditional. Always temporary. Always transactional. She was only worth as much as she could give. It was a reality she'd come to accept. And yet, deep in her chest, for the first time in many years, a tiny spark was born, unprompted and unwanted hope. Foolish, reckless, dangerous hope. Incipient as it might be, it refused to stay put. Just think about it, okay? Luna put a hand on Sunset's shoulder, startling her, as she got up from the bench. I'll go back now. Are you coming? Sunset didn't respond, but simply got up as well and followed Luna, retracing their steps towards the sister's residence. The way back was peaceful and silent, just like before. But this time, Sunset's thoughts and feelings were battling each other in a confusing swirl that she wanted to block out. I don't know if you guys hear how congested I am. I'm gonna make some tea. The way back was peaceful and silent, just like before. But this time, Sunset's thoughts and feelings were battling each other in a confusing swirl that she wanted to block out. When they arrived at their destination, Luna put her shoes next to the door and then grabbed the backpack that she'd previously left on the floor. Sunset expected her to take it upstairs to the oppressive room she was being forced to call home, but instead she offered it to Sunset with an understanding smile on her face. Still, the weight of the backpack on Sunset's hand suddenly felt oppressive instead of freedom. You're free to leave, Sunset, she said at last, soft and calm, but you don't have to. And with that, she turned around and went upstairs, not waiting for the girl's response. Sunset clung to the backpack, palms sweaty. Her heart was pounding again, though for a different reason this time. Because for the first time, she hadn't been burdened with expectation, but instead had been freely given a choice. She didn't have to stay. She didn't have to leave. She could either run away or let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. And so, limbs trembling with fear and anticipation, she took a deep breath, stilled herself, and decided to take the risky path. She stayed. Okay, at first I was low-key thinking that they weren't, like, the author wasn't gonna write what path she took and then reveal the next chapter, but the last words is she stayed. So I think that would have been a cool thing. I mean, like, I guess it's kind of obvious that she would stay because narratively speaking, that would be the more interesting option and it kind of says in the summary, the story, that she's gonna stay, like she's gonna be with Celestia and Luna, living with them. So it's whatever, I guess. The notes is, we finally got a glimpse of Sunset's past. I mostly kept it canon with the fall of Sunset Shimmer, but I changed the dialogue to give it more nuance. And I'm guessing the fall of Sunset Shimmer is probably an earlier work by them, or it's just something like actual source material that I just don't know about. Oh, and we actually acquired a new mentor too. I mean, woo! What do you think Human Celestia would fill that role? Did you? You didn't think Human it says what? You didn't think Human Celestia would fill that role, did you? XD. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. See you next week. So obviously, there's like 15 chapters already, but I'm gonna stop right here because I'm halfway through it. I think that's a good stopping point. It's probably gonna be around 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours long. I don't know. So goodbye. If this story is pretty interesting, and I like this last chapter really a lot. I think it's probably my favorite one. Because I like Luna's voice. I like my Luna voice. And I like Luna in general, like her character. And yeah. So bye, I guess.